4th, 2019. We have 7 members present. Absent are Carrie Snyder and Kevin Schleicher. Do you want to call the order?
Yeah, I'm just going to call the meeting of the Norton Board of Selectmen to order. And we're here just to discuss with the, I always get it wrong, the Charter Commission.
Yes.
I got yelled at last Thursday, or one Thursday, because I can't get commission and committees correct.
We won't yell at you.
You say now.
Yeah. Is anybody taping other than Shane? Okay. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. If nobody has any issues, we're going to take the agenda out of order so that we're not keeping the select board any longer than necessary. I'm sure they would appreciate that. We appreciate their time this evening. With us tonight we have Selectman Bramwell, Selectman Steele, and Selectman Conway. And welcome. We appreciate your time. This is literally the very first interview we are holding, so bear with us. We're kind of still gaining our footing. So we had some general questions, nothing too terribly difficult. If anybody on the commission has any specific questions, I just ask that you raise your hand and just try and make sure everybody's gotten their questions answered before we move on to the next one. And the questions will be open to each of you individually. If you don't have any information or anything you'd like to share or any comments, you can feel free to pass or abstain. Did anybody want to begin specifically, or should I dig in and see where we go from there?
Do we want to start with the general questions that we asked at the public hearing?
Yeah, why don't we start there? You're up.
I don't remember what they are.
I'll do it.
What are the answers?
All right. Let's start with the easiest one. What do you like about Norton's town government services and/or programs? And if you could detail why, that would be great.
What do we like the most?
What do you like about the town government?
The town government, if people are educated, is not that difficult to get through. Our problem has been lack of information, and I know we've spoken several times in the past, but because of financial reasons, we haven't implemented a IT person so that we could probably be more proactive getting information onto a better website or a more active website. The best part, I think, is the people themselves. I mean, you have a lot of people who are very committed to serving the town, and we've been fortunate to get a good cross-section, I think, for the most part. It's just I don't want to get negative thing. The thing that frustrates me is when people get in like special interests. I almost think like town meetings, you shouldn't be able to vote unless you've been prior to town meetings. That it's not as bad as it used to be years ago. I know that it used to be funny because when we used to have town meeting in the Yale auditorium, it wasn't uncommon for when the fire department budget came up for all the fire beepers to go off, because the chief wanted more firefighters to come down, and the fire engines would pull in behind the Yale School, and the firefighters would come in the back door. But I think as long as we can get people involved, I think it's a pretty good set up. Our weakest point is the fact that we can't always get qualified people or people who are interested in the whole picture. Okay, I've said my.
Back on what you said, I definitely agree with what you're saying about not being able to get people involved. Up until this past year, that's been the most frustrating part of being a part of town government, is to have so many needs and not enough volunteers to step in and help out. As far as what I like about the town government, I do feel that while the various boards and committees do their best to present what they think is in the best interest of the town, they don't have the authority to just go forward with it without going to town meeting. So I like the fact that town meeting is a kind of a safety net where the townspeople actually have the right to go and say they agree or disagree. And we saw that happen this year. And I also like the fact that because of the way most of our boards and committees are set up, if the general public doesn't like the way or the direction that the boards are going in, they can vote us out.
From my standpoint, I think that the way it's structured, if you're interested in participating, there's almost always an opportunity for you to do so. It may not necessarily be in the exact role that you want, but you can find something to kind of get a toehold and figure out how things are going. There's so many boards and committees and commissions that are available that there's so many opportunities out there. As Brad and Mary hinted at as well, it's hard to find necessarily the best people or the most qualified for those, but I think it represents a lot of opportunity for folks to come in and get involved. And I think that engagement is key.
Yes.
So I think we heard a consistent theme of it's great when people get involved, but it's hard for people to get involved or to ensure that enough people are involved. As we're looking at the structure behind all this, right, we can't do anything with specific people, but are there any structural impediments that you see that get in the way of that? Or is it just, it's an ask and people are busy and there's just not enough people with enough time?
I think, personally, I think, because I've been around for so long, that it seems like people's lives are busier. A lot of the people in town now are commuting, and after they've commuted 2.5 hours back and forth to Boston, it doesn't leave a lot of time at night for them to get involved. And I think as it's a commuting population, I believe, for the most part in this town, which is to our detriment for getting people involved. I'm sure that being, I always plead guilty to being not technologically savvy, and that we could do a better job getting information out to people. But a lot of it, I mean, it takes money to, like we've talked about, possibly an IT person. Mm-hmm. I mean, it takes money to do something like that. Right. I know that within the past 6 months, the idea was brought up that possibly we might approach the school to see if maybe we couldn't I believe they have 2 IT people on staff, to see if we couldn't, buy a couple of hours or a day of their time. That way it's not a full-time drain on town hall, but we might be able to at least get somebody in-house. I believe what we're doing now is we use we outservice the IT responsibilities, where possibly if we had someone in, like the school department, if we could buy a day of their work week, that way at least it's a town employee, it's somebody that we could, have on call almost. Mm-hmm. But then again, I don't really know, and we haven't explored what their schedules are like. But and to tell you the truth, now that I've babbled, I'm not even sure if I answered your question. And that's one of the things about being around for so long.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is, I think, the lack of time that people have. I mean, it used to be, and then again, we used to get the Sun Chronicle, we had the Norton Mirror. Used to have local papers that actually covered the news. And I haven't gotten the Attleboro Sun for I don't know how many years. And it got to the point where, I mean, about the only Norton news in it, I think, was obituaries. And that was about the only reason you got the Attleboro Sun. They had I would say like a roving reporter who would go from one town to another, and you might get one tidbit of information that was probably 50% accurate, and that would be it for the Norton News for that week. And so it's never been replaced. And then whenever you have the internet groups, you're lucky if 50% of what goes on is factual. I mean, things are taken out of context, and it's tough to be sure that people are getting the right information and finding the proper way of doing it.
Okay.
So the only obstacles I see would be if somebody was interested in being on a board where you had to run for election and they just didn't have the desire
Yeah.
to actually take those steps.
To go through the process of
having to run
running.
for election. It's a pain in the neck, right,
Yeah.
to run for election. And so there are people who just have no interest in doing that. But I mean, they're very, if you look at all of our boards and committees, there are a very small percentage of boards that you actually have to run for election
Right.
for. If you look at our list of boards and committees right now that, where we have the roll of, how many people are in each one, we have openings on almost every single board.
Mm-hmm.
So in my opinion, there's nothing stopping anybody from getting involved in this town except for themselves.
Yeah.
And there's no way to make it easy for them. How much easier can it be to call town hall and say, I'm interested in rec, or I'm interested in the seniors, or what can I do to help? People have to want to do it.
Right.
It's a problem that we have, but I don't think it's a problem that we caused.
And just as a follow-up to what Mary said, the Board of Selectmen, even if someone calls and is interested, she mentioned the rec, we're more than happy to put them on as an alternate or to expand. I don't ever remember turning somebody away. We'd rather bring them in and make them an alternate or, get them involved, just because we need the bodies, and you never can tell when you're going to need them for a full-time position.
For my standpoint, kind of coming in relatively new to this, I think the biggest hurdle is probably outside of your purview, and that's dealing with open meeting law. I mean, coming from like a business background, I'm used to having meetings before the meetings to kind of talk about things. So I find it very challenging to sometimes need to wait 2 weeks before we can have a meaningful discussion on something. And I'm sure it's just an adjustment for me to get through there.
Same.
Yeah.
So if we can abolish open meeting law. I understand the value of it, but I think it seems way too strict and stringent on restricting like beneficial communication flow, not making decisions in the dark, but sharing information and just kind of progressing towards a more meaningful conversation when you're actually in the room.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question on that vein? The next one is sort of similar, and, you can tell us you've covered it. The next question is what don't you like about Norton's town government program services? And I think we've addressed that to some extent, but if anybody would like to add on anything further that they felt they left out.
I don't think, most of the things that are lacking are due to financial restraints, I think. I mean, we used to have more services. There actually used to be municipal trash pickup, and that was one of the first things that went with Proposition 2.5. And then I know I mentioned probably a month and a half ago at a selectmen's meeting to find out if it might be something that people would be interested in, that even if they had to pay for their trash, if we could have like a trash recycling committee who might be able to go out to bid to lower the cost to individuals, so that, you know, if they figured they were gonna get 70% of the town residents, would we get a better price? So even if you had to pay for it, just by working as a group, we might be able to save money. But I do remember, right after town trash was lost to 2.5 at a town meeting, a similar proposal was brought up, and we were told, well, I wasn't on the Board of Selectmen at the time, but the powers to be at the time were told that nobody was going to tell them who was going to pick up their trash and take it away. So they kind of, you know, spit in their own face. It was an opportunity. It wasn't like we were going to have a surcharge and make 10% off of their bill. It was just the idea that we actually put together a bidding process to try to save people money, and you'd still have to pay direct, but we thought just by numbers, because it's got to be much more efficient to have one trash truck going up and down the street than having 6 going every 6th house picking up the trash. So that was just an idea, and it's still an idea that I think it'd be worth pursuing, because the citizenry of Norton has changed, and I think people, especially younger people who have moved in, might be more receptive to the fact that, you know, that's a way of saving money, because, and to me, it wouldn't be that big a deal. I know Mr. Units is going to get information, because I believe when I brought it up, he mentioned that Foxborough was in the process of doing away with that same concept. And so he was supposed to check with the town manager up in Foxborough for the reasoning why they were abolishing that.
Doing away with the negotiated contract that they have? Gotcha.
Yeah. So, but I mean, you know, anytime, like the idea where we're doing the regionalization with the 911, and anytime where we can do things as a group to save money, to me, makes sense. But I'll have to wait to find out why Foxborough decided against it. Maybe, I don't want to even guess yet,
Yeah.
because if I guess it, it's going to get on a website someplace, and then I'm going to be blamed for it. So,
Mary, was there anything you wanted to add about things you don't like? Jack?
And for me, I think there's an inherent assumption / risk when you get to open town meeting that people will behave according to a certain set of standards. You look at what happened, I think it was in West Bridgewater a year or 2 ago, where on the floor of town meeting, someone for the schools made a on-the-floor transfer of like millions of dollars from a town healthcare fund to the school system, and the room was packed with parents supporting the schools, and it passed, and it put the town in a really tough position. And I think they called that the nuclear option, and I think that risk is there, and it could be for parents of the schools, it could be for other groups. And I think, Brad, you had said it, the special interest group, you pack the meeting and you worry about who is there. I think that's a huge risk that we've kind of danced around the edges of for a while. We had one transfer last year from the cafeteria workers, healthcare into the general education fund, and that got people's hackles up. I think we're probably approaching an even more grandiose gesture before too long.
Follow-up questions? What changes would you like to see in town government? Programs or services? And we've covered this to some extent a little bit. You've been very forthcoming, which we appreciate.
Gosh. There's got to be a ton of things.
Can I add to that too?
Sure.
Processes?
Yeah.
Like any processes for maybe the budget or the, any,
I think, and supposedly it's supposed to be starting, I think the the town manager and the superintendent, and possibly getting the school committee and the board of selectmen doing a better financial planning early on, and realistic planning. I know, I was kind of taken aback by the fact that we were asked about doing like a financial plan. I can understand you have to do a financial planning, but it's very difficult for me to understand where, because there was one person, and I see and hear people all the time, and I can't keep straight where it came from, but in answer to doing planning for revenue, the number of 2.5 was brought out as the base. We start with 2.5, and then we add on probably 1.5% for new growth. And someone actually asked, well, where'd you come up with the 2.5? And I mean, Proposition 2.5 is staring us in the face all the time, and I just can't believe that people don't understand how revenue is generated for the town. And it's almost like we need an economics class for everybody before we do anything. It's I just find it hard to believe that people don't comprehend that we don't have an unlimited economic supply, and that we are limited by laws that make it so we can only spend a certain amount. Things that don't help us economically is dealing with the state. I mean, we have our town meeting the end of April, beginning of May, and the state won't have a cherry sheet where the town knows what to expect, probably until mid-June, if we're lucky. Oftentimes, it's after July 1st that they haven't finalized the budget for the following year. So people don't realize that a lot of times, as far as revenue is going, we're giving the town manager especially is giving his best guess, and that's basically what it is. I mean, you have to guess on. You can calculate the 2.5%. As far as new growth goes, you have to take a total shot in the dark, because you don't know. Like we've got the Blue Star Industrial Development. You don't know if they'll get one building built in a year. You don't know if they'll get 3. I mean, we can only hope that they get up and we get tax money coming in. Another thing that you're not aware of a lot of times is excise taxes. Some years, I'm trying to, within the last 10 years that I was on the board, the excise tax difference was almost $1 million. And for some reason, everybody decided one year to buy a new car, evidently. And so all the new excise tax bills went out, and we got this windfall on automobile excise tax. But it's something that, how do you know who's going to buy new cars? And there's just, and then state aid, the state doesn't have a clue what they're doing. So how we're supposed to guess is, it's virtually impossible to make a logical budget when you only know one of 3 numbers that you're dealing with. And fortunately for me, that really, I mean, I'm involved, but that doesn't fall on my shoulders. That falls on the town manager's shoulders to try to figure it out, and he basically has to go by his best estimates and by past history. And the fact that we rely so heavily on our free cash from year to year eventually is going to catch up with us. And I've probably gone off on another tangent because I have a very difficult time just sticking with one question, I guess.
If you don't mind, you actually, in your tangent, gave me an idea, and I don't know whether, I'd like to get your input. Within the town's charter,
Yep.
we define the fiscal year. If we were to change the fiscal year to end September 1st, or September 30th, or December 31st, does that assist with the budgeting process?
I don't think we can. I think that might be part of Massachusetts state law.
Yeah.
Because it coincides with
Is it?
the state fiscal.
It's in the
year.
charter, though.
Yeah. no,
I'm almost,
And that's why we have the fall town meeting.
Yeah.
Because we have to do it that way, and then that kind
But
of
I'm-
sweeps up the mess.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that we're bound, even though it says it there,
Yeah, it does actually say unless another period is required by general law.
yes, and I think that's what it is. It's the July 1st to June 30th is the way the state mandates it right now.
Okay.
If they were to change it, that sentence that said that would make us have flexibility.
Okay.
But we're always playing catch-up. Okay, I've muddied the waters.
Mary, what changes would you like to see?
Well, I do have some points that I wrote down, but I don't want to like jump ahead if you have other more specific questions after this, or is it just really kind of general?
There are some, they're all fairly generic.
Okay.
And, you know, if we feel like we've kind of already covered them, we can certainly skip them, so I'm free to letting you.
So I'll hold on, and if you don't ask the right questions, I'll
Okay.
at the end.
Absolutely.
Mary, I have a follow-up question. What's written down in front of you?
So I think financial planning is a must for the town. I understand that a lot of assumptions need to get made, but right now we're not making really any assumptions. So I think being able to understand what good looks like, what average, and what bad, because one of these years we're going to have a bad year and we're going to be caught completely off guard. So I think at least having a baseline understanding of what we need to do and what the targets are to either take advantage of opportunities that come before us, or on the flip side of that, where we would need to cut in order to get that balanced budget. Beyond that, I think one thing that we really lack is nice parks in the town, like a place to go. I have young kids, so having playgrounds. Somebody online was kind of slamming Tricentennial Park, but it's around the corner from my house, and I've pushed my kids on those swings for years, and I love it. It's a nice little jewel. The landscaping is nice, and I would really like to see that on a wider scale in a more central location for the town. In terms of other programs or services, I agree with Brad. I think having a town trash service again would be great. Like 2 or 3.
Any follow-up questions on that? Yes.
The park, you're talking about parks and the kids.
Yeah.
I actually was thinking if we could put like a skate park for the teenagers, because they really don't have a lot to do, and they have one in Attleboro, and it's really, they all go there, they have no trouble,
Yep.
and they just spend a lot of time there. We don't really have nothing like this for any of the kids here. And if we did have that, I think that would really help, you know. I agree with you on that park stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a huge gap in what we do with kids when they're out of school. Right? So school gets out at 2 to 3:30. Where did they go? Based on when I'm around town, they go to Dunkin' Donuts and they hang out there and then they meander about. But between the lack of sidewalks and the lack of community places, not necessarily town-owned, but even like business-based, there's no real kid-friendly, teen-friendly spaces to go that are certainly within walking distance or even a short drive. So that's part of bringing in new businesses, maybe zoning changes in order to make those a bit more friendly. I know the sewer extension project down Main Street will help bring in some, hopefully, new blood, but I think the kids and teens are underserved for sure.
The Blue Star, the the industrial park, they're putting a really nice park out there when they get it done. It's supposed to be really nice out back. I don't know what's gonna be there, but it's gonna be a real nice park, this, the way it looks, you know.
Any other follow-up questions?
I do, you probably have it in the paper already.
Go ahead. No, you,
I was gonna ask kind of the opposite. Well, let's just see. The town government services, I was gonna say, what do you think we have too much of, or like processes or like committees that we could consolidate, eliminate, that we think we have too much oversight or too much?
There's way too many meetings.
Yeah.
So we talked before about like kind of the hurdles to people getting involved. It's really hard to get to all the meetings that are relevant to the things that you want to do. And I don't know how we fix that, because if you start consolidating groups, then those meetings go from 2 hours to 6 hours, and now no one's going to want to volunteer for it. So I don't know how exactly you kind of tease that out and balance it. But, I mean, I know some of you folks around here are on a number of committees and boards, and you're out of the house three nights a week. If you have young kids, that's really hard. If you're a single parent, that's even harder. So how do we make this a more balanced thing for every demographic to participate in? I'm very fortunate that, you know, my wife doesn't kill me when I come to these meetings a couple times a week, and I'm very fortunate for that. I don't know how we solve that, but for me, meetings.
You know, maybe take that a step further. I think at our first meeting to the public, right before the special town meeting, there was a gentleman in the audience. He spoke a lot about how intimidating it is as a citizen if you have an issue in town, and how to deal with that, and what board to go to, and how it all works. And so people in this room sit on some of these boards and kind of at least maybe have a clue maybe how this town works. But you know, if you're not involved, and then something, all of a sudden they're gonna build a train next to your house or something like that, and where do you go? And it's, you know, it's intimidating. And you go to a planning board meeting, and you know, it's procedural, and you know, probably not the world you live in for a lot of people. And I think that's intimidating for a lot of people. How to get them, how to even get their voice, how to get on the agenda.
That's just going to create another committee.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, another committee, yeah. How to do it.
Write a synopsis of
How the town
you know,
works.
You know,
Yeah.
frequently asked questions. If you have this
Yeah,
problem, where do you go? And
right.
I mean, it'd be an excellent thing, you know, project.
Yeah.
But who are we going to dump it on?
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be great, and I can understand, because I mean, I've been here for years, so I pretty much know where to go. But basically, when I first started on the school committee, because I've always stuck to the facts that whether I'm on the school committee or on the selectmen, if someone calls me, I'm just a person. I don't have any more power than anyone else until I sit here with a quorum of members of the Board of Selectmen. And same thing with the school committee. So if I would get a call, what I would do is I would explain to them, basically what you're talking about is, here's who you go to see, and, you know, I give them a chain of command. This is how you handle that. I wouldn't do it for them. And I said, if all else fails, eventually it's going to get bumped up to, at the time it was the school committee. And I think by doing that, I stopped getting the calls, because that's not what people wanted. They wanted somebody who was just going to go and do it for them. But like I said, I've always felt that that's not my place. My place is not in the day-to-day operations. It's to oversee things, but just using my knowledge of that, I'm more than happy to direct people on who to see and things like that. But it'd probably be a great idea for a group to get together and map out, if you want to do something, you know, like I said, frequently asked questions, and give like a street map on how to get through the maze of your bureaucracy, even as small as Norton is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it, we hear it over and over again, was the communication and how if you go to the website, for example, and you got to go to a planning board meeting, you might spend quite a while just figuring out how to get to that link and.
Well, I mean-
And I'm not criticizing anybody, it's just the reality of it all.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not tech savvy,
Yeah,
but, I mean, I was overwhelmed trying to figure out where I was going tonight. And then when I saw there were 3 meetings going on, I really started panicking, figuring, I'm not going to the right place.
It goes back to Jack's meetings.
I think we're very fortunate that the Norton Media Center does film just about everything and puts out a lot on live broadcast. But with so many meetings, inevitably there's some that are going to get missed. I would love to go back and watch some of the permanent building committee meetings. I don't believe there's very many of them that have been recorded. I know people can individually record audio files and they can get uploaded, but that seems more cumbersome. I know we're very limited on the technology infrastructure we have. I think that should be a key priority moving forward, is making sure that I don't want to separate things into tiers, but there should be certain groups that always have access to video recordings for a public record, more than just the meeting minutes that volunteers take.
Oh, I thought that meant our time was up.
No, I'm sorry. A little longer, if you don't mind. Sorry, do Brad or Mary have any feedback with regards to Denise? Is there any place where you could see some consolidation, where we have too much government committee oversight, et cetera?
I don't see where you can really cut back too much. I mean, there are so many things to be done, and just like Jack said, I mean, if you dump too much of it on one group, chances are you're not going to get the people to volunteer. And, I mean, every time I'm thinking of different committees that we could use, because there are things that go on or should be going on in town that don't get done because there's nobody really, tasked with taking care of that particular thing. I don't see any way of streamlining the number of committees. It is inconvenient, the fact that there are so many meetings. It's inconvenient, the fact that we're limited to the number of places that, I mean, I guess you can only broadcast one live at a time anyways, but the number of places that broadcast is available is very limited. I think for our last selectmen meeting, we were talking about using the cable studio, and it had already been booked. And the only other facility other than this room that was available for a live broadcast was the high school auditorium, which to me was just kind of an overkill. And to me, you put me in a big room like that, and I'm not going to get educated, because it had to do with the Elm Street property. And so I wanted to more one-on-one with the engineers so that I understood it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to, I'm not going to say I didn't want the townspeople to hear it, but it is live, but I want to make sure that if I'm going to get blamed for it, that I understand it. So I preferred to have it on a smaller room, but it's unfortunate that those are the 3 choices that we had. But I think part of that has got to do with the fact that we went to fiber optics, and the number of drops was decreased. And I'm sure Shane will.
He's nodding, yeah.
Yeah, so as technology advanced, we just didn't have the funds to equip all the former locations for live broadcasts.
So I actually do attend quite a few meetings, but I can honestly say I don't really feel like I'm wasting my time at any of the meetings. I don't feel that there are many that are redundant. Various committees will have to discuss the same issue. I'm sure if there's a way to streamline it, I would be in favor of it, but right now I honestly don't feel like I'm wasting my time on any of the committees that I go, and I actually wish that I would have more time to go to some of the committees that I end up, you know, avoiding because or not going to because I can see it on cable or whatever.
Any follow-up questions?
I kind of have a question. I'm not quite sure how to ask it, but I'll give it a shot. But if you were looking at the town from the outside, let's just say you want to propose a new office park, would you look at Norton and say, geez, it's a tough town to deal with? You know, I have to go to this, I have to go to Selectmen, I have to go to the Conservation Commission, I got to go to, you know, I'm going to go lots of different committees and move things forward. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just wondering if.
For me, having lived here all my life and having been involved, I know that if someone comes in and is proposing a development, a building or something like that, one of the first things that Mike does is he'll get a meeting together with conservation, planning, building department. He'll get all the people that they're going to interact with into a meeting with them, so he can streamline the process as much as he can for them. But if they aren't aware of it, I mean, I don't know how you advertise that. And I hear things, and I've heard that in some sectors, I believe it came from a representative, that Norton has a reputation up in Boston as being difficult to get into, and which I find hard to believe, because I've always thought that we've always tried our best to welcome people, and like I said, I know for a fact that all the development that's happened in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, that whenever they approach us, Mike gets all the people together they're going to deal with, and they sit down in one room and they talk it all out, so that there's a game plan ahead of time, and the developers or the business owners or whoever they happen to be know exactly who they have to contact for what, and they try to streamline the process as much as possible. So.
I think I just hate it when people say that Norton's difficult to do business with, because we're really not. I think what the problem is, we've got the same processes and procedures that every other town has as far as conservation, planning, et cetera, right? So anybody coming into town has to expect that they're going to have to go through these different departments. I think that if anybody were to go out and talk to the businesses that have moved into this town, I think that the report that they'll get back will 100% say that we're a good town to deal with. Our public safety departments, our planning departments, our selectmen, we all bend over backwards to try to get these developments in. Okay, so let me back up a litlittle bit. There's some that 40Bs may not say that about us, okay? So, but I'm talking about businesses that we see as being a good fit for this town. The thing that makes Norton difficult to get into is we don't have any commercial land. So it's not that commercial or industrial land. We don't have enough land to give companies coming in. So that makes it difficult to get into this town, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not because we've got boards or volunteers that are fighting businesses from coming in. And I actually think if you were to go out and talk to some of the businesses in town as well, I think that they would tell you when they come to the board with problems, or the different committees that they've been worked with, whether they want to stay here and try to expand, you know, just help through certain things. We've had different establishments come before us looking for expansions on their liquor licenses. We've had neighbors complain about it. We've always given the businesses the benefit of the doubt, because as controllers of the license, we can always pull it later if there's a problem. So I don't know why they're saying that at the state level. I'd be curious to hear the factual behind it. Maybe I'm naive, but after all my years of being here and I'm being on the IDC and speaking with businesses in town. I actually think that Norton is a good place to do business and a good place to have a business. I think we're very fair to the businesses in town. I think we appreciate the fact that many small businesses in this town donate very generously to this town. Our seniors benefit from it, our students benefit from it. So, it's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
From my experience dealing with other towns through my day job, our setup is identical to a lot of other towns in terms of planning conservation. I don't think you want those boards to be a pushover, because then you have no real control over what comes in. You get, as Mayor said, businesses that aren't necessarily a good fit there. There was another point I was going to make and it just fell out of my head, so I apologize. If it comes back, I'll let you know. Oh, that's what it was. My work is based in Billerica, and a few years ago, they sort of carved out a new role. So they have a town manager as well as a director of economic development. So the person that is in charge of facilitating those meetings between planning and conservation, his name's Rob Anderson, and he does a great job at it. The results of his efforts are measurable in new business and tax-based growth that he gets out, and he's able to network with other towns, and he goes fishing for new businesses, and it allows the town manager to focus on managing the town, and his job is to go out and get new businesses, keep the ones that are here. He's been a huge asset for us to deal with from my standpoint, and I know he's worth his weight in gold up there.
Any follow-up questions?
I have some questions, not follow-ups. So
That's okay. No, throw them out there.
Okay. First of all, thank you for your comments on the general questions. I think they've touched upon a lot of things. But some of my questions focus mainly on your role as select persons and your role and your responsibilities. And I think you may have touched upon them, but I just want to make sure you have a chance to say, are there any roadblocks that you think individually specifically prohibit you from doing your job within our local government? Not really a general sense in the government, but you specifically as individuals, as select persons. Do you feel that there are any roadblocks in your way for doing your job, or do you feel that there are certain things that enhance your ability to do your job?
I think the way the charter is written, the Board of Selectmen is very limited on what we can do on day-to-day business. And, I mean, there have been several issues that have come up that, while I think maybe they should be addressed, they really can't be addressed as a board, in which case I've suggested speaking to people as individuals. But I don't know if that would be, if taking that power and giving it to the board, I don't know if it would make it better or worse. Only because I remember when the Norton Board of Selectmen used to be the best fight on TV. And, I mean, years ago, it used to attract viewership only because of how nasty the Board of Selectmen meetings were. And that was probably pre-charter, when the Board of Selectmen was more involved with the day-to-day operations. I think the only issue I ever had is the fact that, like I've said, I believe that I'm only one person, and at times, on both boards that major boards that I've served on, you get board members who sometimes forget that they're only a citizen unless they're sitting behind the table with at least 2 other members of the Board of Selectmen or the school committee. And they have, everyone who's elected to these positions have to realize that it's that old theory about separately you snap a twig, but you put them all together, and that's where the strength comes from. And I think that's the only frustration that I've ever had, is occasionally you'll have people who maybe might be walking the tightrope between the line of what I would consider the role and what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And I think it's just having the right people, the right mix. They have to understand their roles. But I'm like I said, I'm almost afraid about having too much power, only because I remember what it was like in the past. So there's a total non-answer for you.
Oh, there were a few answers in there.
But no, I mean, they're a thing. It has to do with having the right mix of people, first of all, and it's just the oversight, and you have to trust people to do the right thing, and you have to also trust other people to be ready to call someone out if they feel they've stepped over their line. And for the most part, I get along, I feel, very well with all members of the boards I've served on. And I don't mind and have never minded saying in private that I think you went too far on that. Maybe you should reel it back. And I think if everybody was like that, we'd have a much smoother running operation. And but I don't think it's a charter thing. It's something that people have to buy into the fact that, yeah, you've got this position, but this position only entitles you to this amount of power. And it's just people I know I had mentioned the fact that we don't have handbooks for the position that I've been on. But I think if people, when they take their oath of office, if they just got a copy of the page or pages in the town charter that pertain to what they are supposed to do, and they read them and understand them, I think that would be the most important thing, is just understand what you're really there for, and just limit yourself. And the only other thing that I always used to say, and I got in trouble once, was that I try to go into every meeting with an open mind and make my decision by what's presented to me. Once when I was on the school committee, I made my mind up before I went in, only because I was getting pressure from certain people, and I ended up having to apologize to a person whose family was giving me the pressure, and I happened to vote against him. I still think I was right, but I did apologize that I probably didn't go in with an open mind. And I think we just need people who care and educate themselves on what they're here to do.
I think there are obstacles that make it a little bit more difficult to get the job done, and we already talked about open meeting law as one of them. For example, at the last town meeting, when the vote was against the town center, the town hall community center, had we not left an open agenda item on our agenda saying that we would reconvene after town meeting with the selectmen, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did. In essence, that was just to cancel the vote. Okay, so if that wasn't there, we wouldn't have had that flexibility. So we wouldn't have been able to cancel it, and we would have had to go forward. So there are times where, whether it's state law or our own charter or bylaws, prevent us from doing things that might be the easiest way to do it. But honestly, I think in general, we're usually able to get around things. And from my point of view, although I may be frustrated in the moment, I also know that those rules, regulations, and laws are there because to protect the public. So it's just something you have to deal with.
Thank you.
For me, I mean, so much of what I think we get asked to deal with is just information. So having easy and early access to that information so we can come in being informed, for me, that's huge. I know sometimes we've gotten 12-page legal contracts, and you have about 90 seconds to flip through and make it seem like you're smart and know what you're talking about. We've started getting them earlier and earlier, but still, it's a matter of a day or two, and depending on your week at work, it's hard to do that. It comes with the role, right? Not everything is going to be easy, but I think having more information earlier would be helpful. And then I think there are times when we need to ask for more information, and it's again, I think it's a delicate balancing act between how much we should be asking for and how much is given freely, if I'm phrasing that accurately. For me, I think we are trying to look out for the best interests of the town as a whole. So I think we should have a pretty wide berth of getting information to help make our decisions and make informed decisions. Because much like Brad, I don't like to come in with a closed mind. I like to learn, and I'm more than happy to have my opinion changed based on the information that's there. But we need that information in order to kind of get that flexibility of mind that we need to do the job effectively.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'm actually going to piggyback on Janie's question. Brad alluded to it slightly, and this is more for Brad and Mary, only because they have more experience and history with the town. Can you think of any particular point in time or a specific instance where you had to refer to the charter for guidance and found it either unclear, ambiguous, lacking, too restrictive, along those lines, not in line with your expectations? And I understand this one's a tough one off the cuff, and if you'd like to give it some consideration and then potentially email us if you've come up with anything specific that you think might be helpful or relevant. I understand it's not an easy question right off the cuff.
I can't think of any time where I've, like in a meeting or something like that, felt the need that I had to refer to the charter.
Okay.
Recently, I've started carrying a copy of, I think it's a page and a half, of the selectmen's duties in the charter. Actually, it's in my back pocket right now. But that is more the fact that I have Jack and Renee on the committee with me, and being chairman, I want to make sure that I can lead new members properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they have a question, before I give them the wrong answer, I sometimes will refer to the charter just to get an idea, am I reading this right? And it's just, I had mentioned earlier that I saw one of your meetings when you were talking about like handbooks that talked about how to do different jobs. And I mentioned that I've been on the school committee, I've been on the selectmen, I never got a handbook telling me what to do. So, being the chairman, I welcomed 2 new members with no background, and I want to be able to give them the proper leadership. That's the only time that I've really gone to the charter. But I've also been on charter review committees, I've been on town manager search committees, so for the most part, for the different parts of the charter that I would refer to, I know it relatively
You're
well.
up to speed.
I'm enough to get by. And as far as like the handbooks, I know I met with Renee, I think twice before the elections, just to give her a rundown. I never met with Jack. I did give Renee permission to have Jack reach out to me if he wanted to speak with me, only because I wanted to make sure that we had, if they were successful in their run, that we had 2 members who were up to speed, because it's not, it's not a difficult job, but there are restrictions, and the biggest thing is learning what you can do and what you can't do. And a lot of the citizens out there think that if you call a selectman, they can snap their finger, and we're gonna have Keith down there fixing a hole in front of their house in 15 minutes, and it just doesn't work that way.
Or you'll bring in FiOS.
Yeah.
Mary, did you have anything?
I mean, I have referred to the charter several times over the past several years. I have never found it hard to read or understand. That was the
Okay.
question.
Have you ever found it lacking?
The charter itself,
Yes.
no. Maybe some of our policies and procedures, yes.
Okay. Policies and procedures
Within
within,
the charter, yeah.
okay.
Such as?
Would you like to be specific?
Sure. So, see, I don't know how deep you guys really want to get into this, all right? So, okay, I'll just throw one thing out there. If you go to the section on the town moderator, very simple section, right? And it's very clear that the town moderator appoints the FinCom totally on his own. And so it's easy to understand, but I mean, if you think outside of this a little bit and you think about what we actually have set up in this town, we right now have a very good town moderator. And what I'm saying is not in any way reflective on him or what he's doing. I think he's doing a good job. But if we think forward to the fact that we have a town moderator who is elected, who single-handedly appoints our most important department, committee in town, right? I can see how that could be a problem. So that's a problem I see with the charter. I don't think our town moderator is set up in a way that will preserve the best interests of this town moving forward.
Not only that, he's getting old like me. I mean,
Well, I think Mary's point was not so much.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, if you don't, you never know who's gonna be there.
Sure. Right.
I personally, on something like that, think it should revert almost back to the way they select the town manager's search committees, where the selectman selects a person, school committee selects a person, planning board has one, I believe the assessors have one, and the moderator selects 3. So, if that adds up to an odd number, then that's the correct thing. But that way there, you're getting a good cross-section from the town.
Right.
And it doesn't put all the power in one person's hands.
So I would say I see and understand that point, but you also have like the town manager who appoints a lot of positions single-handedly in a similar kind of fashion, right? So what kind of oversight or controls do you have on those, right?
So on those, and I'm not saying that that's something that needs to be looked at as well, but you have at least a board of selectmen.
But do you guys approve? You guys approve his appointments?
We have to approve every appointment.
Okay.
So if he makes an appointment that we're not comfortable with, and we have in the past said, no, you're gonna have to come back with something else. So with the town manager, I think there's a little bit more of a check and balance in the immediate sense, right?
Gotcha.
With the town moderator, yeah, there is. You could vote that person out. And again, I'm not speaking in any way on what's going on now. I'm thinking in the future.
Yep, yep.
And just for an example, but I won't use a name, there was an appointment made recently. We lost a person who, a subordinate, took the place, and the board asked that it be on a temporary basis until that person we felt comfortable with, and has since been promoted. Without saying a name, but anybody who goes back and looks is going to be able to figure it out.
It's almost like a probationary period, so to speak?
Exactly.
Okay.
For the finance committee, they're appointed to 3-year terms?
Yeah, correct.
And they have the finance committee gets appointed to 3-year terms, so they have to get reappointed every 3 years?
Yes.
Did you have other policies and procedures that you
Well,
thought?
then you should ask, because there was one.
Are we going to have to drag these out of you?
I'm sorry?
I said-
Oh, yeah. So speaking of the FinCom, again, if you go to the charter, it's very clear. It explains exactly how the FinCom members are going to be appointed, what the FinCom does. It says that the FinCom will report its recommendations on every article contained in the town meeting warrant in writing. It's very simple to understand what they're doing, right? Again, if we think outside the box a little bit, and also, again, I just want to make it clear that I've got no problems with the current FinCom, and what I'm saying is in no way a reflection of what they're doing or what they have done, but there could be issues in the future. I believe there's ambiguity in what their actual role is, and perhaps it's not in line with the expectations of the voters. So I also believe that when we have town meeting attendees reviewing the warrant, many people, and I certainly have in the past, look to see how the FinCom voted. And a lot of people who have not had the time to do their homework before coming to town meeting will just say whatever FinCom says I'm saying, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that up to this point. But my fear is that I think that there's a false sense of security that there's been some sort of due diligence on the FinCom's part, and that may not always be the case. So I think that if the charter, I'm sorry, commission, what are you guys?
Commission.
With the
Commission,
commission.
yes.
Okay, sorry, you got me.
I got that now.
You know, thought about looking into this and maybe outlining specific expectations of the FinCom. It would be in the best interest of the town. And, you know, further along these lines, maybe pushing the FinCom to maybe outline more of the budget process and what are the roles of the FinCom in the budget process, the town manager and the school committee in the budget process. And lastly, for the residents of the town, I think that the budget should be easy to understand, easy to read, from both the town side and the school side. Because a lot of people that go to town meeting are not familiar with reading budgets. I will admit, it's not my forte. I'm not a great numbers person. A lot of things have to be explained to me, but I've made a commitment to the town that I'll take the time to learn it. When we've got people come to town meeting, they need to make a decision pretty quickly. So I think maybe you guys noticed the last one, we had like a pie chart that showed how the budget was broken up. I think for some people, visual is good. But I just think, again, if you look at our charter, it's adequate. It tells you how the FinCom comes about and what it does. But does it go far enough?
What other policies?
I don't actually, so did anybody else have any questions, or should I just take over here?
You seem like you have a
It's
lot.
easier for me if I just get this
I did
out of the
have
way.
a question that's somewhat related in terms of, you know, do you feel there are appropriate checks and balances? And you alluded to that,
Talking about the FinCom?
no, I'm talking about in general with the charter. And you sort of alluded to it previously with the Board of Selectmen having some oversight over the town manager appointments.
Right. I mean, I think it would depend on which particular part of the charter we were looking at.
Okay.
Whether they're
Nope, that's fair.
for checks
It sounded like you had some more to say about FinCom, though.
No, I
No?
don't. I don't.
Okay.
And then another thing I just want to point out is, and this is a kind of a thorn in my side, it comes up over and over again, the Board of Water and Sewer Commission, again, in our charter, it's fine, it's laid out, it's easy to understand, in my opinion. It's an elected board, and seriously, it's our most important resource in this town. We've got more issues with this, and there's no accountability. So I hope that it's within your realm that you guys can take a look at that and maybe consider helping us put that out to make it an appointed position again.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? Can you speak a little bit about just help us understand the difference between the elected and appointed. How does the appointed give you more accountability? How
Okay,
does
so
it?
yeah, so an appointed, if you're appointed onto a board by the Board of Selectmen and you don't show up, you know, nothing's getting done, the Board of Selectmen can, there's a couple things. Well, if it's not a big deal, we can wait till you're up for reappointment and just not reappoint you. Or we can say, listen, you know what, you've missed, you know, 50% of the meetings in the past 2 months or whatever it is. We would like to replace it with somebody else. If it's an elected position, the Board of Selectmen has absolutely no control over it, and the only way to fix that situation would be to vote them out of it. So the thing about water and sewer commissioners, it's a really, really important board. But if you think back to what we said before about what obstacles are there for people to get involved, we probably have people in town that are very knowledgeable about the water sewer, but do not want to at all get involved in an election to get on that board or deal with that whole hassle, right? Right now, they have no way to get on that board unless they run for it. If they were to come to us and say, hey, this is what my background is, I know this stuff, I do this job in another town, I want to be on this board, the Board of Selectmen could appoint them.
And how does that differ than, say, the planning board?
Oh, it doesn't really, but I'm just all
Okay.
over about the water and sewer right now.
I guess I'm trying to in my mind, been trying to figure out why are some elected, why are some appointed? You know, why is conservation appointed? Why is planning elected?
So that way, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know who decides.
Yeah.
And-
Unless it just works without an issue. Like, so our town clerk used to be an elected.
Right, right.
We recognize that that was a problem. Now she's appointed.
Treasurer.
Yeah, the treasurer, yeah.
I mean, there have been changes occasionally where we've gone from appointed to elected, or elected to appointed. I think mostly the thing with the water and sewer is, first it's the fact that we're dealing with water. It's our resource. And it's also dealing with the large amount of money. And especially like with the infrastructure that's going to be going with the sewerage down West Main Street. They're large projects that need oversight, and not that anybody on the Board of Selectmen personally is knowledgeable enough to do the oversight, but at least it'd be another set of eyes to watch it. Mostly it's from a personal standpoint, it's the fact that as a member of the Board of Selectmen, if we have a question, usually regarding the water and sewer, I would say over the past 3 or 4 years at least, it's been impossible for us to get a member of the Water and Sewer Commissioner to come to a meeting. Usually the only information we get is they'll send the water and sewer superintendent. But we can't mandate that the commissioners come to a meeting, and we've asked several times and have either received no or just have received no answer, no reply at all. So they haven't been receptive to sharing information with us, which makes, so you kind of, where if they were appointed, they'd have no choice. We want to talk to you, you're our agents, come to the meeting. So it's things, that's just, from my personal standpoint, the main thing is the fact that they have no accountability to us. And like Mary had mentioned about running, how a lot of people might be educated or, you know, have the education to be on it but not run. One of the members technically this year didn't run. It was Mr. Bishop just didn't do he was elected, but it was only because he went online and said, I didn't do the paperwork, just write my name in. And I mean, it worked, but the point is, it's just goes to show, even he, who's very popular, and I can't imagine would have any difficulty getting the 50 signatures required to run in a normal fashion, elected to circumvent that. So. I wish I had thought about it.
I just want to make one point, I'm not an advocate of the Board of Selectmen appointing every single board. I don't think that that's a good idea, but I think that some boards require a little bit of a different look. And I'm wondering, Cindy, to your point, I wonder if there have been fewer issues with, say, planning or conservation because there's so many state laws, right? So there's not a lot of wiggle room or gray area, and there aren't really a lot of laws governing our water sewer commission, right? A lot of it is gray, what they want to do. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
I mean, isn't it sort of like a political issue also? I mean, like planning and conservation, I guess, to a certain extent, is you elect somebody who has a vision for your town, right? In theory, at least. Whereas the water, you just want water.
Water's our infrastructure.
It's not a political discussion.
Our infrastructure.
It's like, I don't want to turn the water faucet on, I want water to come out. That's
Yeah,
really the end of the
the only
discussion.
time it's political is when you turn the tap on and it's brown.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I guess, I would guess that's why in some cases, you want somebody in the planning board who in theory represents the people of the town and kind of,
Right.
they have a different vision than the other guy who ran. One may want, a lot of commercial, other one might be more interested in more
Right.
residential type town, and vote for one versus the other. Versus with water, I don't know what you would run on versus
Yeah.
clean water versus dirty water. Other than that, I don't know what you run on.
Yeah, I can't imagine too many get votes for dirty water.
No, probably not, but I don't know, that's why I would guess why some boards are more, they're elected because they're more political from a more political perspective.
I don't know whether now is the time to go into this, but Brad had mentioned that he had asked for meetings with the water and sewer, and I'm looking at the charter, and 3.1E, elected officers, town officers of which Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners are named in this section shall be required to meet with the Board of Selectmen and/or the town manager at the request of same at any reasonable time for consultation and discussion on any matter relating to their respective offices.
And as elected, how do you make them come?
Just,
So isn't that what we had talked about the last meeting, just how does this get enforced, right?
Yeah, you cannot compel them.
And there's certain things that can't be,
I mean, I could stop going to the Board of Selectmen's meetings.
Okay.
And unless you're going to recall me, I'm sorry, I'm yours until my term runs up and somebody runs against me. And it's the same thing with any other elected board. That's what makes it difficult. We have no way of holding them accountable, and really, I'm not even saying that this board is doing anything wrong. I just think we can do it better, okay? I think there are some boards that need to be held more accountable than others. And when it comes to our drinking water, I don't think this is something that should be considered in the same way as some of the other boards who have less gray area. And it's just my opinion.
Other boards and commissions that you feel the same way about, that you currently do not?
I love everyone.
Okay.
So I have a quick question, just because reading a neighboring town's charter today, it kind of was highlighted for me when I was going through it, but we don't, I think, currently have any term limits on any of our positions, and I could be wrong, someone correct me if I'm wrong here. But what would be your thoughts for or against term limits on any of the current positions that we have today?
So we do have term limits on some of them, FinCom, but then you can be reappointed or whatever.
Right, so I think some of the charter that I was reading today had like, you can only be reappointed 3 times, and then
Yeah, there was
You
one
have to take a-
random board that,
like a
yeah.
year, there was a couple of them, they had to take a year break before you could be on any other committee or board or
I agree
something.
with term limits.
Huh?
I agree with term limits.
Yeah,
personally, I was on the school committee for 12 years. I plan this to be my last, because I'll be 12 years on the Board of Selectmen.
for here.
Because I believe in term limits. So I've set 12 years as my limits. The only thing that frightens me about putting it in the charter is that we don't always have people turn out. I mean, how many times have I run unopposed? And that, I've told people that this is my last term, unless I won't let the thing go unfilled. I mean, it's too important, but my intention, the day after election, I was talking to Mr. Units and told him that this is my last 3 years. Because in my mind, if I believe in something, then it starts at home. And I believe that we need term limits federally. I believe we need them on the state level, and so if I'm going to suggest that they should have them, I'm going to do it also. So, like I said, unless something were to come up that I felt that I needed to stay on, I don't plan on being here in another 3 years. So
But as far as the charter goes, what would you prefer? Like, so if you have the right people, they do the right thing, right?
yeah, I just, like I said, the only thing about putting it in the charter is the fact that we've had such a difficult time filling committees and with appointees and, or even getting, how many times have we had, as a selectman, had to appoint members of the planning board because nobody would run? I hate to shut somebody out and have a seat go vacant because an incumbent couldn't run. So I would, while I like the idea of term limits, I'm afraid of them only because of the historic turnout in Norton politics.
That's fair.
I fully support term limits as well. I think that's, and I understand the concern about a lack of participants in the elections, but perhaps this would spur people who don't necessarily want to run against an incumbent to get out there and have a chance. And if I heard you correctly, possibly with the exception of the Board of Selectmen, if there's a vacancy, the board could appoint somebody there. And I wonder if the language could be written that if an incumbent who's interested in, say, the planning board wasn't eligible to run for another elected term, could they then be appointed in the absence of another candidate? Splitting hairs there, but
Yeah, that's why we pay the attorneys.
yes.
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, absolutely.
Are we just talking, I know you seem to be talking about specifically Board of Selectmen, or all elected and appointed, or where does the line, is there a line at all drawn?
Same thing. Because I'm afraid of the fact that we don't get people to show up for elections or to take papers out to run, I'm afraid of telling somebody who's been serving that you can't serve anymore. We don't have anybody to replace you, but you can't do that job anymore. So it's, like I said, personally, I'm all for term limits. I'm just afraid of not having somebody to fill the seats.
It's a good question, Teddy, because like, do you consider, people who are on the water bodies committee, right, do you hold them at the same standard as Board of Selectmen or Planning Board, or, I don't know where you draw that line. I mean, because there's definitely something to be said for longevity in some positions, right?
I know the gentleman from the FinCom that just recently retired. 40 years of experience, and everyone's talking about 47 years. Thank you, Peter. Years of experience that everyone on that board cited, committee cited as hugely valuable in steering them through some of the times. So it'd be a shame to lose that. So I think there's a line somewhere.
It's one of those things, no matter what you do, you're wrong.
I think we've hit almost all of my questions in some fashion. Does anybody else have any specific questions for the board?
I had one more. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to look at other area town meetings or their town websites or any of their, information that they have about how their town is run. Has there been anything that struck you as particularly like, oh, I wish we could do that too, or I'm glad we don't do that, or anything that strikes you as speaking to you from those interactions that you've either observed or?
To be honest, from my point of view, I'll be looking to you guys for that, because it's all I can do right now to keep up with what I'm supposed to be doing, never mind worrying about what other towns are doing. So that's something I hope to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
The only thing that I've observed and always thought was a relatively good idea, I don't know if it is or not, is I've always kind of liked the idea of the representative town meetings. Only because I figured, first of all, you know what room we're going to have it in, because we don't have, and we know how many people to plan for. But besides that, I feel that if you've taken the time to run to be a representative town meeting member, you're going to educate yourself on the finer points of what the articles are on the warrant. And also, like I had said before about, I thought that you should have to have been to 2 town meetings prior before you could vote, just because I would think it would get people more rounded in government issues instead of having, stacking a town meeting with people who are there for one item. And that was what I always thought was probably a better representation of the true intention of what the town really wanted and what the town really needed. I just thought it'd give some stability, I guess. But I don't have any personal knowledge. I think North Attleboro did that for a while, and it seemed to work better, but I really couldn't be.
I believe my understanding with them is they had trouble filling all of the seats.
Yeah. Oh, we used to have trouble filling all the seats when we had a quorum requirement.
Yes.
And then when the quorum requirement went away, then usually twice the quorum showed up. Because everybody was afraid that somebody was going to do something in the back room and sneak something through. It's sad that everybody thinks that everyone is out to be sneaky, and it's tough to be sneaky when there's that camera staring you in the face and the microphone picking up everything you say. And it's unfortunate that people think that way.
The question was exposure to other forms of government.
Yeah.
This has been my exposure. The towns that I deal with through work are set up in a very similar way with a small board of selectmen and the other committees that support it.
Any other questions?
Oh.
Yes, Peter.
Yes, Peter Wiggins, Honor Mayor Norton, and I'm involved in my in government by listening to all the meetings and taking notes, and I put it on my Facebook page. Plus, I provide on what happened in Norton in the past.
Thank you.
Right?
Yes.
My articles from the past.
Very helpful. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Laura.
I'd like to thank the Board of Selectmen on behalf of the Charter Commission.
Random?
I'm sorry, absolutely, yes.
Sorry, I just.
She's got her notes
as long as
over
I'm
here.
Seriously, do we get all of your
You're doing good. No, I just had 2 totally random things. So, Section 7, the periodic review of the charter and bylaws, calls that the town organizes a special committee for the purpose of reviewing the charter in the years ending in 0.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you guys would take a look at that and maybe consider making that an elected board, just like you guys are, and take out the appointment, because I think an elected board, like you guys are, gets the public more involved in it, and I think that it has potential of getting more work done. And then my last comment would be, and I couldn't find this in the charter, so I don't even know if it falls under your realm of responsibilities, about public notifications. I just feel that we need to address how public notifications are currently being handled, and we definitely need to change this in order to reach out to more citizens. I don't know what that right answer is, but I just think it's inadequate what we're doing now.
The
Any
only-
follow-up to Mary? Yes.
The only other
Brian.
thing I mentioned to Lauren at the beginning is when you get into reviewing the town manager searches, so far I've been on every town manager search committee that we've had, so I'd be glad to come back and talk to you about the procedures that we've done. But thinking about what Mary just said before I forget, I believe in there, it indicates that we had to place an advertisement in some newspaper of a certain circulation. And I think that with the job search tools on the internet, I think, if I remember right, the last time we put an ad in the Boston Globe about this big was like maybe $1,200. I think it's a total waste of money if we could eliminate using newspapers and go to more financially reasonable and more widely circulated forms of advertising for positions.
So I guess if I'm to understand what you're saying is that you don't think it's flexible enough to allow changing the media based on the current times?
I think it specifically says newspaper or something like that.
Okay. It's too
And I could
prescriptive,
be
yeah.
wrong, it could be state law that requires it, but if and when you get to the part about the search for a town manager, if that's in there, I just want you to be aware of it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any questions from the board for us?
I mean, one question I had, we talked last, this is not the appropriate venue for it, but we talked last week about the charter committee appointments. And it's the year ending in 0 is when the appointment needs to come out. We were all concerned about confusion between this group and an appointed group.
Basically, I mentioned it only because Mr. Kimball had mentioned it last year, and I wanted to get it out so that next year I don't forget, and this way here I can point my fingers at 4 other people on the board.
Okay.
I think that that's tabled at least for another year.
So the intent is not to appoint anybody?
No, not right now. It's just to let people, I just wanted to sound the alarm bell that keep it on your mind, on your calendars.
Okay.
And, I mean, I'm not sure exactly when you'll be finished with your process.
I think we know.
And
Yes. We have to have our final recommendation by, I think it's August of next year. And then it gets circulated, and at that point, we don't actually vote on it until April of 2021.
Okay, so there will be a need. So I didn't know if we would be voting on before that, but as long as it's in 2021, we will have to appoint a committee to review the charter. What charter they're going to review, I don't know.
Well, you also run the risk of them putting on the agenda or putting on the ballot a vote in contrast to the Charter Commission's recommendations.
Actually, their vote is a town meeting vote, I believe.
Is it
Because
town
usually-
meeting?
I believe it's just town
I
meeting.
thought it had to go to both if it was a charter change.
It
I think it's both,
possibly
isn't it?
does.
Oh, that's
It's just that
right.
usually there's grammatical changes
Mm-hmm.
and changes that would, if bylaws have changed, it makes it so that the charter is in conflict with bylaws. It's usually minor tweaking of the charter, not anything like what you're about to propose. But if we get to that point, it'd be something that the two would have to probably hammer out almost like the Senate and the House. You'll have to have a joint committee to have the proper wording that they might find inappropriate, so that yours would,
Well, for example, and this is purely hypothetical, we could be voting to eliminate a position that the Charter Committee wants to recommend making appointed versus elected. And we are going to be in conflict.
right.
Brad, I think at the last meeting, I had asked Mike to get opinion from council.
Right.
To see how we delay the process until you guys are done. So maybe we appointed at the end of, and I have no idea if this is what they'll allow, appointed at the end of 2020, but not really give them the ability to do anything until you guys have finished yours. I mean, there's got to be some way, and also maybe because there's already one active during 2020, that it's a legal question. Obviously, it makes sense that having two doing the same thing is going to be really dumb. So we'll have to wait and see what legal says.
Okay.
Okay.
If it's dumb, then you know how legal's gonna come down.
There'll be a way around it.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the commission? Anything from the board that you'd like to offer?
All set?
Okay.
I just move that we adjourn the selectmen's meeting.
Aye.
Aye. We're out of here.
Again, we thank you
you.
very much for your time.
Anytime at all.
Hey, Mary Jackson, man, how you doing?
How you doing, Peter?
And what's the first part of the scrap? Who's so much with Jason? Oh, it went good?
Okay. Going back to the agenda order. We're going to review the minutes of our last meeting, June 10th. We'll just want to wait. Beckman's. If we're ready, I'll take a motion to accept the minutes of June 10th.
A motion to accept the minutes?
Second. All in favor? Motion's passed. Okay. Just a few admin items. One in particular, August 26th, we had the Board of Selectmen room held, and I did not give it up in the event that we need to fill in some additional interviews with folks. So just keep that in mind, that there is actually 3 meetings for the month of August that we have reserved. We don't necessarily have to use it if we don't need it, but just keep in mind that that could potentially be an additional meeting date, would be August 26th. the weekend, yes.
Is there a date we have to decide by to not use?
No, it's just the use of the room, so we could call her the night, or
Okay,
probably
so
not the
there's no
night
law that
before.
says
Yeah, we'd
that,
have to
okay.
post an agenda, so she'd be looking for it.
Okay.
So no, probably at some point within August, we can make a decision on whether we need it or not. I think a lot of it will depend on scheduling conflicts of the people that we want to meet with, and maybe we have to offer that as an additional date. But file sharing. So I've sent an email to Lauren. I haven't heard back. I did actually try and follow up with her earlier today. But based on what we've seen with other boards and committees and what they use, we feel we're probably safe in using Dropbox to share things along the lines of like the public comment tracker. Also, if we wanted to make available, survey information, other items that we've been reviewing, that sort of thing. My recommendation would be for every document that we have, we'll have one person be the gatekeeper for it or the owner of it. In the case of the public tracker, it would be Janie. And then she would share it and assign at least one other person as having access to edit it. In the event, God forbid, something should happen, that we have a backup for every document that we're using. And everybody else would be granted just view access. Within Dropbox, there is a ability to comment on specific things within the document. I just ask that you not place any comments there, and we'll avoid open meeting law issues in that manner. I'll do the same with the Smart Sheet, the timeline, so I'll have primary access to it. Denise will be my backup, and then I will send everybody an invitation to actually view that document, so you can refer to it at any point that you want. Somebody had asked if you could also post the sign-in sheet for the public hearing. There was a question about this one person that came and talked to us afterwards, and we don't remember what their name was.
Well, I have it now if you want to look at it, but that was one of my questions, is where do you want me to digitize it?
Yep.
Put it up?
We're going to put it
So-
on Dropbox.
Okay, I will do that. But I do have it here if anyone just wants to have a look at it.
That'd be great. I think Sandy might actually want to. Did you have a chance to set up Dropbox, or do you want me to?
Yeah, so I just have to, I can send an invite out to everybody to.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so that'll be set up, and I think it was 2 gigs we get free. If it gets to the point where we're running out of space, we can either set up a second one or choose to archive things that may not be necessary, a year from now, if that works for everybody. Okay, so we talked about that, Dropbox. There was some people have been out and about and talking with folks, and I think we're starting to get some rumors going about what exactly the Charter Commission is working on and what we are planning on doing. And I think it's just a good time to remind folks, if you are in that position, just to kind of reset their expectations. Try and make sure that everybody's aware that we're only in the information gathering stage at this point. I think it might also be helpful to pass along that we're not going to be able to fix everything. We have to do what's in the best interest of the town and what we feel we can actually get past at election. So we may not be solving all of the town's problems, but we're at least kind of setting a course in the right direction. One of the things that's important to know is that, this commission is the only body that can actually change the form of government. So that has to be our primary focus at this point in time. And, other things, learning as much about the options that are available to us in terms of forms of government is our main priority right now, and getting up to date and educated and as much information as possible so that we can make well-educated decisions. And the only other thing I offer is that, if there is some question, doubts, uncertainties about what we are doing or planning, just simply invite them to a meeting. As you can see, again, we've got, other than Peter, nobody in our gallery. And if they are not comfortable in coming to speak with us, then just to please send us an email. Okay, moving on. Anybody have any other admin issues that they'd like to raise? No? Seeing nobody in the gallery, I'm going to close the public comment forum. And we've already met with Board of Selectmen. On your agenda on the very back page, it looks Sandy has included who we've got coming up next. Is it next? July 8th is next? Wow, that seems so long, far off. Is Denise confirmed?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Are we going to have those two in a panel like this, or are we going to have them separate?
They come at different times.
Yeah, I'm going to propose at least for this, well, when we've got, I think when we've got people from a single board, I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea meeting with them as a group. So, for example, on July 22nd, I could see taking Renee and Mike together.
Yep.
But I agree we should probably schedule some time specifically and have them, come at a certain time. I'm of the opinion we're probably going to need more time with Mr. Units than we will with Denise. If everybody's, I'm seeing nodding.
Yep.
How much time, given we used an hour and a half of the Board of Selectmen's time?
Well, can we start with, and can we save Mike for last?
Yeah, I think that would be fair, and as opposed to having Denise sit around for
Right.
a significant period of time. How much time do we want to allow for Denise?
Well, knowing that this was an hour and a half and realizing that we had
Three
three
of
different
them.
people answering, right? I'm thinking 30 minutes to
Half an hour.
45 minutes.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay. Should we err on the side of caution and make it 45, or should we limit ourselves and try and stick within 30?
Are we gonna put this in the agenda? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, a specific time.
Then if we do that, then we have to stick to it, right?
Yes.
Okay, I guess I would hesitate, then what are we gonna do?
Do you have to stick with it, though?
You can't say
Yeah.
up,
I didn't think you had to stick to it. I thought it was
you
just- I
can't
thought
say
it was a
up to
reasonable
40
estimate.
minutes?
I thought it was a reasonable estimate.
Wait, why are we trying to put a time in the agenda? Why not just put her
Right.
first on it and then put Mike and then whatever else we need to do?
And just give them a soft time of, come at 7 and you come at 7:30 or something.
Okay.
I think Denise is gonna be a lot quicker than Mike anyway, so let's put her first and
Yeah.
get her out of here, then Mike.
Right.
Do we want to put them ahead of our normal business?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd do that, yeah.
Okay.
Anytime we have somebody coming in, it feels like they should get to go first.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll plan on Denise for the first half hour? Let's
And
just
so
say.
note too, that I've also invited one other person, and gave her a choice of either July 8th or July 22nd.
Oh,
So I'm
okay.
waiting to hear back from her, so we potentially could have, her on the 8th as well.
And that's at the Estelle Flat, right?
Mhm.
That's Veterans Affairs?
Yes.
So that's-
So again, I was
if she
trying to make it
picks-
quick. Yeah,
Yeah, I say if she picks July 8th, just put another 30 minutes before Mike then, right?
If what?
I said if she's gonna pick July 8th as her date, just do like 30 minutes for one, 30 minutes for the next one, then put Mike.
Right.
Yeah. And we can schedule Mike for an hour, but I foresee that probably going over,
Yeah.
potentially by
That
a
feels
lot.
like that's all the content for that meeting.
Yeah, I am of that opinion as well, and maybe we hold off reviewing we put it on the agenda to discuss, but we'll play it by ear as to how late we actually wind up going and see how.
Yeah, if we need to push it off to the next agenda, we can. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Although the next one is equally meaty.
it is.
Board of Selectmen, and that's Chief of Police, right?
Yep.
I don't think we're gonna get away from there, you know.
Right, they're all gonna be big
It's
ones.
gonna be big, yeah.
Everybody's important. Any comments or suggestions on how to make that process any easier?
Nope, just plan for a long night.
Okay.
The only,
Do you have to designate a time for each of them? Can you say, you know, an hour and a half for interviews, and then, you know, Denise takes 20 minutes, and we could just move on to the next one? Like,
Yeah,
you
I
have
think
to-
that's what we're gonna, no, I
Yeah,
think that's what we're gonna wind up doing.
Instead of designated time for each, just give a
Yeah.
time and.
Yeah, we'll give them a rough idea
Yeah.
of, you know, you'll go first. We expect to need you for 30 minutes, plan for longer if necessary, and go from there.
and the only thought that I had as we were going through this, and even through the public meeting a couple weeks ago, our open-ended questions are very open-ended, and that's on purpose, I think. But our scope is limited to structural components of the form of government, right? So the charter itself. So I think if the questions are a little too open, then we can spend a lot of time hearing people have very interesting conversations and very true and useful conversations in a lot of ways on things that we just can't do anything about, right? So I don't know if we want to try to rein in some of the openness of how we're asking the questions so that the respondents ideally stay on, all right, these are the things that we can actually address in our work.
Okay.
So I would agree. I think like the Board of Selectmen questions that we asked tonight were a little bit more general government kind of questions, but
Yeah.
I think it probably makes sense in their position just because they do oversee so much.
Yeah.
Whereas before, when we're interviewing Denise Ellis, our questions I'd imagine would be significantly more narrow.
Right.
Right, because she's not touching all those other
Yeah,
pieces of the pie.
yeah. But I really liked your question, Janie, about like what of the way we do things today gets in your way or makes things like that.
Hinders or helps your
That's
job,
perfect,
yeah.
because that's about what can we change in the structure to make things better, right? And that's, I think, what we want to try to get to.
Agreed. Yeah, I think I think we're going to have specific questions that are applicable to Mike only. I think there are going to be questions that are applicable more towards boards and committees than they are to employees. So we can talk a little bit further about that. Well, actually, we can't because we're meeting with Mike Units next. So, yeah, I guess my suggestion would be to come prepared to ask specific questions related to the jobs and the job functions that people are meeting with.
So, yeah, so I mean, the watch out is though, it's not just what they do today, and what their role is today, what could it be tomorrow, right? So even though the scope of Mike Unit's job is X today, does that make sense in the future state,
Right.
right? So it may be inherently, some of them might be more general.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that Jack brought up tonight, though, is something, and it was more of a broad question. And he brought up the position of the Director of Economic Development, where, things you would like to see. So I don't necessarily think open-ended questions are bad. I think there may be some good ideas that come out of those, but I do understand in the essence of time, trying to limit the scope a little bit further.
Yeah.
And you can be open-ended and on the topic
Yep.
that we can address, right? We can create or remove positions, and, right?
Yep.
So that's great, right? That's a thing that he would like to see that's within the realm of our authority to recommend. So it's great to bring that up, but there's just, like, if people start talking about the reservoir, well, there's only so much we can do about boat ramps, or.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Agreed. Okay. Schedule. Discussion of Westwood's charter. And if the format we used last week works for everybody, I'm just going to propose the, yes?
Wasn't here last week?
Yes.
What was the format?
So we kind of, everybody went through, we kind of, went through page by page, not specifically by item, and kind of as things stood out to folks that they wanted to raise, or if there were specific questions, things that weren't understood. Kind of in this case, now having reviewed it against another charter, I think that may raise some more questions and issues, but pertinent things to our position that we saw that were different, that we liked, that we had questions about, that we feel should be raised.
Got it, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so we looked at Town of Westwood. It is an open town meeting format with 3 selectmen. They have what's known as a strong Board of Selectmen versus a strong town manager. Population of just under 15,000 folks, and they have home rule charter that they adopted in 1970. So at first glance, it looked a lot like our charter, but there were some definite things that were pointed, were different, one of which, town elections, that was a little bit different in that they actually, if the primary is held in a particular year, then they have to move the spring town elections, so then they have 2 elections and no actual meeting until May, which just seems like a lot of government for a tiny town, was my opinion.
Yeah, on the second page, what struck me as just more of a question mark, I'm not sure I fully understand it, was this pre-petition under section 5.
Yeah.
It seems like it's almost a way of getting something on the warrant without going through the same process of getting, it's 5 voters versus 10 voters securing a petition.
I'm not sure it actually ascertains you a position on the warrant. I think all it really gets you is
Since it presents to the-
guidance.
Yeah, non-binding guidance.
And then it goes
The
on,
lead petitioner.
Yeah, section B is the response from the board that it's submitted to.
Right.
yeah, I read it and it looks like, if you want it on the warrant, you need 10 signatures. And if you're just looking for guidance from either the Board of Selectmen or FinCom, all you need is 5.
So you go through that step first and then get 10 votes to put on the warrant?
It looks like you can even move from, because they have to provide an answer 7 days prior to the close of the warrant, so it looks like all you would need to do is get an additional 5 after you've gotten your guidance, and you can put it on there.
Okay.
I think all the 5 votes gets you is guidance on the
I just circled it
article.
more of a question mark, like this is unique.
Yes.
Not sure I fully understand it.
I did the
It's
same,
different.
yeah.
I think it's interesting, because when you try to write a petition for a town meeting warrant, if you're trying to do it by yourself, and you're not a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to come up with a language for it, unless you have something else that you're just copying off of, I think it's very limiting and intimidating to try to come up with something. And so I think that's a nice way of, here's what I want to come up, here's what I'm thinking of, and get guidance from the
Yeah.
boards to say, well, maybe you should word it this way, maybe,
Yeah, and you hear town council often say, like, you have to present the warrant as it's written.
right.
Yep.
And that's-
So sometimes you may end up shooting yourself in the foot because you wrote it the wrong way.
Exactly, because if for a citizen's petition, it has to go in exactly, you can't change it.
Yeah.
So even, like in our case, the way, if we write, put a petition in, whatever you write is what goes in. So let's say, then after they talk about it, and the Board of Selectmen talks about it and says, oh, that language is is not gonna work or something.
Yeah.
Then you can't revise it unless you go to town meeting floor and do an amendment.
Yeah.
You can't change it at that point. So this, I guess, would,
I'm
help.
sorry,
Eliminate-
Shane is locked out. I just got a text.
I just happened to look at my phone at just this moment. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess it makes a lot of sense in that venue.
Interesting concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know some towns actually allow you to use council to come up with a petition. So they'll allow the use of counsel to help you write your petition and make sure that it's legally sound, which is another way of doing the same kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
I've been looking at the charter on the Westwood, Massachusetts website on my phone, and it's got 13 charters. Count them, 13.
I also just put a question mark on the section 6, which is the business sessions of the town meeting. So it almost seems like that is like an information session before the town, 3 months before the town meeting, right?
You know, it's funny because in 221, they call the annual town meeting should be held on the last Tuesday of April. They call it a town meeting, but it's actually the town election.
Yeah.
And then the business session seems to be the actual town meeting. I'm not sure why they call them different things.
I think business session is how we refer to like the budgetary town meeting.
There shall also be a second business session of the annual town meeting held in the last 3 months of the calendar.
Yeah, which the Board of Selectmen can actually cancel at will. Well, if there's less than 10 articles on it.
Okay.
Here's a question. Maybe this is more for Denise. Under 271, the last sentence, failure, so it's talking about Finance and Warrant Commission recommendation. Failure to timely post, publish, or mail such advice, estimates, and recommendations in the manner provided by town bylaw shall not affect the validity of the town meeting. Does it affect the validity of the warrant, though?
As we all stare.
I'm looking.
Sorry.
I don't think it does.
Okay.
Yeah, it almost looks like the standard clause that you see in contracts of, you know, if any one of these clauses is deemed to be invalid, then that doesn't affect the validity of the rest of the contract, right? Looks
Well-
like that kind of language.
Yeah, and I'm reading that as, it says specifically, though, town meeting and not necessarily the warrant. So if a warrant does not get a recommendation or any response, does it still go to town meeting?
Well, yes, because you can still have articles, warrant articles in your town meeting now that aren't recommended by,
Not necessarily aren't recommended, but let's just say there was no discussion of.
so this says that they've had discussion, they just haven't written it down, right? They've had the meetings, they just haven't
Failure
had
to
a
timely
chance.
post, publish, mail advice estimates in the okay.
I think
All
you'd
right.
have to look at the bylaws to see what they're actually requiring. They may have some pretty specific things that they're requiring get mailed out to people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so they're saying, because I know in some towns, they mail every single person the warrant. So maybe it says something like that, and where all you have to do is comply with state law, and this is beyond state law.
Yep,
They're saying even if that doesn't happen, it's still,
they go beyond it, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I had circled on that page, just, in kind of in general, as I was kind of going throughout, I noticed that a lot of them, almost all of these positions, identify whether or not there's compensation, and I think that we stay silent on all of ours, and maybe that's a good thing, I don't know, or do we want to explicitly state
I like the
that they're
fact that
not
it was.
not compensated, right?
I like the fact that it was stated because I do have questions, like the town historian, for example. It is a town manager appointed position, which most others seem to be, have some sort of remuneration.
In other towns, you mean?
No, in ours. So if you look at the town manager,
Oh, the appointed positions.
yes,
gotcha.
they all seem to be paid positions, but there's a town historian on there, and is that person actually paid? And there's nowhere that says, I suppose I could go and look up and see if there's a contract or if there's ever a budget line item for them, but there's no real easy way to determine who's actually a paid employee versus voluntary.
I kind of like that it's in there, but then,
You're talking more for the boards and committees, that it was said that.
correct. They all state in here that they may receive compensation as may be
Right.
appropriated at town meeting, or they say that they are not
I
eligible.
wonder, is that in our bylaws?
Uh,
Whether they can or can't be compensated?
I think in our bylaw, it's been a long time since I pulled it up, but I think in our bylaws, it does talk about positions that are compensated, but the titles that they have don't always match up with, I think, what we have in our charter. So it's hard to necessarily match one for one. So,
And going through the rest of it, like, some of them do point out without compensation or with compensation, and some do and some don't.
right,
So those were a couple things I circled I didn't know, not in terms of the compensation, but why point out some and not others?
right.
So, just going back to the process for a minute, are we keeping some kind of running list of things that we find interesting in other places? Like, we've called out the compensation, we've called out the thing about the failure to post. You know, I was gonna call out that the moderator serves 1 year instead of 3. Are we tracking all of these, or are we just discussing them now and sort of hoping we remember?
So myself, my own personal, just tracking the thought process.
Yeah.
I was gonna start to create a spreadsheet and just kind of compare, like, what does each town do? But I can certainly send it to you guys if there's things I'm missing or forgot or whatever. But certainly, since in Cindy's meeting minutes, we're gonna have a lot of these thoughts too, right?
You're gonna track these sort of items of note
Right.
as we discuss?
But again,
Okay.
Yeah.
something like that I don't,
Yeah.
I miss or.
For me, I'm more of a visual, like, chart kind of person.
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
like to see, like.
Sticky
all
notes
these-
on the wall.
Yeah.
So let's, I guess, discuss that then. You know, I have been kind of going through, and as I've found, you know, things that I would like to investigate or potentially look at a little bit further, I've just been kind of keeping a list as I've seen them. So as to avoid getting into kind of more of the heavier discussions now. But maybe it is worthwhile, as Dave has suggested, to keep a track of things. Do we want to vote on things as we see them, things we would like to address at the time when we are looking at the charter and coming up with changes?
Are you suggesting to vote on things now?
No, not necessarily voting on things now, but voting on whether we may want to look at certain things later, or do we just want to?
Like voting on adding it to a list of topics to consider? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Gotcha.
I like the idea, I do like the idea of keeping track of them. I like the idea of almost doing it individually, because I don't think we might all agree on everything, especially as we get more and more down the road. So I like the idea of kind of keeping an individual list and then bringing it out, like we all have our list at one point when we're going to come together and
So I have to
talk
take my own
about those
notes.
things. What?
My own notes, that's what you're
Yes.
saying? Okay.
Yes.
That's really what I was trying to
You
avoid.
can copy us. but,
Sandy, write this
yeah,
down.
Your own notes. That's my opinion, I think.
Yep.
Instead of, you know, I think a lot of things we're going to be in general agreement about.
Yep.
And then some things we're going to have some
Yep.
issues or differences, and is it worth discussing them at the moment or waiting until we're ready to compile?
But if there's things we have questions about, like how does this work effectively in your town?
Yes.
Like, I guess, can we go back to a point person, like in these towns, to kind of
I don't
ask
see,
questions?
I
And
don't
bring it back to the next meeting kind of a thing?
yeah, I don't see why not. If somebody has a specific issue or a question, you know, my recommendation is the person who has the question does the legwork and tries to coordinate with somebody within the town.
To find out?
Yeah.
They must have contact information on their websites, I'm sure.
Some of them, yeah.
I think it's not the town manager or,
Yeah, right. Whatever they have
town
is there,
administrator.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, we may, I think we'll have mixed results. You know, some people are just going to ignore us, but, No, that's not a bad idea. And I'm sort of the same mind as Janie was in terms of, everybody keeping track. Initially, that was how I was planning on doing it, just so we don't kind of taint the process with, ideas, conceptions up front.
Yeah. Agree.
All right. Let's see.
Are we still on that page?
Sure.
Oh, because, yeah, on that page, I also, like Dave was saying, I pointed out the notion of the moderator elected for one-year terms, as opposed to anything longer.
Oh, yeah.
Was something I noted, and the Board of Selectmen appointing an acting moderator. Those were a couple of things that I circled and pointed out. I didn't really have questions on them, I just thought they were.
What's our moderator, 3 years?
3.
Yeah.
Did you just say the selectmen appoint the moderator?
Backup
And a
moderator.
backup.
Moderator, yeah, yeah.
Whereas I think in ours, the moderator actually appoints their backup if they're absent.
I think our charter's the same way.
No, the moderator appoints the.
Yeah, I think in our charter, I think it points out I think it points out a difference between a vacancy and an absence, if I'm correct.
Right.
I'd have to look back at it
Yep.
in terms of
Procedures.
the moderator appointing one and the Board of Selectmen appointing another.
Yeah, so I think the Board of Selectmen would appoint the vacancy.
Correct.
But if they're just absent for a period of time and need someone to back them up, they can appoint.
That's appointed by the
moderator.
actual moderator himself, yeah, or herself.
Yeah, my only concern about the short, I like the 1-year term if we have enough interested people. But that's one of those roles that's tough to get anyone to want to do.
Real tough.
Yeah.
Real tough.
Yeah,
Yeah. I know, and from a
And you've
practical
got a
perspective, I'm sure they roll the same person. twice.
correct.
Decade.
I think if we had more, if we had people showing more interest in becoming more active, I would be like, shorter the better, right? But
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it.
No, I think we're gonna struggle with that a lot as we get,
Yeah,
Brad was talking about that a little bit tonight.
Yeah.
Ideally, you'd like to have term limits.
right.
People aren't gonna step up, well, then you need that person, you need somebody.
But is it a matter of they don't want to step up because?
Yeah, you don't wanna run
th-
against a guy who's been there for 12 years.
Right, and, he's
Yeah, yeah.
well-liked and established
Right.
and sort of entrenched,
Yeah.
so.
But it doesn't say anything about not serving, 15 years if he or she is
Right.
continued to be elected.
Elected.
So,
Right.
correct, there's no limitation there.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so that was what I brought up with them, and some of these have term limits, some of them do not.
Yeah,
And I think Mary indicated that it probably makes sense for some and maybe not for others. I tend to agree with that if it's like a specialty knowledge area, right, where maybe you don't have a ton of people that know a lot about conservation, for instance, that maybe those appointments might not have a term limit versus more general knowledge or don't require that specialty.
I'm even thinking like assessors.
Yeah.
And some of that might go into what winds up getting appointed and elected, right? When I think of water and
Right.
sewer, right, an engineer who's done that kind of stuff for a long time feels like a good person to go in there, but maybe would either not at all be interested in running or have a tough time getting elected. Then some of the social styles maybe don't overlap between those two things. So where there is that need for technical expertise, as opposed to for us, it's, 9 pretty smart people that can sit in a room and have good conversations and figure some things out. We don't need to be experts in anything to start with, right? So
Right.
having this be elected makes sense, right?
Right, yeah.
The Board of Selectmen powers and duties was very bare bones.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier that this is a strong Board of Selectmen. I read through and noted more that you said it was pretty bare bones. What was it that makes this a strong Board of Selectmen?
I think specifically it's 3-6-1. They actually have the power to rescind their appointments.
They also have they appoint the police chief, the fire chief, the Department of Public Works, and the town council, so they have,
Those
there's
department heads.
more that they're appointing
Got it.
than the town manager.
Yeah. And town manager, they also do town manager, but it's also in a different place. I didn't understand why it wasn't listed, unless it's not considered is town manager not considered an officer?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so that's why it would be. Yeah, and I also had a question with regards to actually how much power was contained within rescinding an appointment. And, you know, if you've got to negotiate, the Board of Selectmen would appoint, let's say, for example, the police chief, but I am not of the opinion that he would be the one negotiating the contract. Wouldn't that be the town manager?
In this town, yeah, the town manager does all the contracts, but the selectmen do all the appointments.
Yeah, so I had a question as to, you know, it says it rescinds the appointment, but are they actually doing the terminating, or does that go to the town manager for that duty? Does a rescission actually mean firing?
Are you reading 361?
Yeah.
Is that where you're reading?
Yes.
I would read it to read generally that they have the power to fire him, yeah.
Okay.
And then also serve with written notice of the board's intentions and reasons for rescinding
Right.
said appointment. So at some point in here, there is a process.
And certainly they'd have to comply with any contractual obligations that they had to, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a collective bargaining.
Right. And it also says the board shall have the power to rescind any appointment to any board. So, you know,
Well, it says under, further on, it says under this chapter.
Yeah, so they have the boards that are listed up above that.
Yeah, so it's the police chief, the fire, the Department of Public Works, and council.
oh,
Right, but then they also
Didn't
have Board of
catch
Health,
that.
Council on
Oh,
Aging,
yes.
Conservation,
Yep.
Recreation.
right, it lists more.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, moving on. So, school committees without compensation, Board of Assessors may receive compensation. Sewer may receive compensation.
Planning Board, no.
Without.
Yeah, so they all, I mean, most of them have some mention of compensation, whether
Yeah.
it be with or without. And it doesn't necessarily say that it is with, it's if it allows it at town meeting.
May.
Right,
Yeah.
may.
I liked the idea of the associate members. I think, was it Sandy or Carrie last week that brought up the question of,
Alternates.
can all boards have alternates and why or why not? This may be a way of addressing that.
Yeah, it's interesting because they're doing it for their elected positions, which I don't think we have any alternates in our elected positions.
What's
I
that?
don't think so either, yeah.
They have it in some of their elected positions. I
Yes.
don't think we have that in any of our elected
Yeah,
positions.
they've got associates listed both in elected and
Right.
appointed.
It's interesting that the one board, at least that I can find, that has an even number of people is the library trustees.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even notice that.
I don't,
Yeah, some of the numbers of board members or committee members don't necessarily make sense when you think about the scope of what they're doing, but. Like for me, I think 3 members of the Board of Selectmen, especially when it's a Board of Selectmen heavy, with responsibility, like you're gonna possibly get a lot of things that are voted on by only 2 people.
right.
If one person can't make it, and that seems like it's not enough.
And not to mention you have open meeting law that as soon as any two of them
Yeah.
are having a conversation.
You got a quorum.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
you
that
can't
too,
talk.
yeah, yeah.
You literally cannot talk outside of meetings.
Right. You can't be my friend.
So anyways, the concept of the associate member may be a way to address alternates. I like the fact that the associate members also have voting rights in the event of an absence, so, you know, I think it helps with achieving a quorum where they'd have to cancel less meetings. I also don't necessarily think having a person who's been sitting in and not necessarily had a chance to be vocal, having them have an opportunity to weigh in every once in a while is not a bad thing either, so.
I think this was the first time I noticed, and they'll have it in a couple of positions, but not necessarily on all of them, but the Board of Health was the first time where they actually had a type of minimal requirement for the job, kind of spelled out in it.
Yeah.
I think they had it here, and they had it for the town manager.
It's the first appointed board, too, that we've gotten to in the charter.
Yeah.
All the others have been elected, so.
Yeah.
you can't-
Yeah, but I kind of like the idea of some key roles, having some minimum requirement of what it takes to kind of lead the charge in that role.
Yeah, I think the only problem with something like that is if you put specific language like that and you don't have somebody fill that role.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I was just saying, if you put very specific language, like right here, it says must be a
Doctor.
Must be a doctor.
Yeah.
Or nurse,
So-
it says or a registered nurse.
Yep.
Okay, well, it
Yeah.
doesn't say wild situation, but if you don't have either one of them.
But I would say
Really step up.
I would say keep looking, because I don't want Joe the trash man making health decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, my only point was like, if you're too specific, I think you just have to be careful how specific you are, because it might put you
Right, I think you have to be
out.
careful of where you put those requirements, but I think there are some jobs that lend themselves to really, I think you have to stick to some kind of minimum requirements. Doesn't necessarily mean you're calling it all of it, but.
I think we're gonna run into like, there's what you want, and then there's the world we live in for a lot
Yeah.
of this stuff.
And I think some of where it got into more specifics, specifically the town administrator, I'm remembering, where it says, it's got specific educational requirements, it goes on to say that the Board of Selectmen has some.
Flexibility.
Yes, if, they've got commensurate working experience.
Right.
Right.
So there's ways you can make language so.
Yeah,
I think that goes back to the question of what goes in the bylaws and what goes in the charter, right? How much do you want to lock yourself in
yeah.
the charter? If it's outlined somewhere, does it need to be locked into the charter?
I think we jumped over recall, but I just wanted to point out, we were talking last week about how they had 30 days to get 15% of the signatures, and Westwoods is even worse, they only have 20 days to collect 15% of the town signatures to get a recall petition going.
Yeah, I looked at that too, to make sure that, I always think of that horrific Fall River incident, that you can't get reelected if you've been
That's here.
recalled. It is here.
They
It is
they
here.
can do it.
Here.
It is.
With that wording surprised me a little bit. I underlined that on 484.
I think they probably just assumed nobody would have the temerity, for lack of a better word, of actually running for a post that you're being recalled from.
But actually, I read it. It says, unless such officer requests otherwise in writing, the town clerk shall place the officer's name on the ballot without nomination.
I think, is this all recall?
Yeah, so it's
Because
484.
in conflict, though, is 488. It says, no person who has been recalled from an office, who has been resigned from the office after the filing of recall petition, shall be appointed to town office within 1 year after such recall or such resignation.
That's an appointment.
But that's
though.
someone who's after they've actually been recalled. 484 is someone who's in the process of.
It's talking about shall be appointed versus,
Yeah, elected, I gotcha.
yeah. So, yeah, like the mayor of Fall River. You can be recalled and reelected literally in the same night.
That always stands out to me as like the, watch out, like, what not to do.
Yeah, exactly. So 521 is the first instance, I think, that we've seen of a term limit.
Yeah, the Council on Aging one, yeah.
Yep.
And just to go back real quick to the Board of Health one with the specific requirements, I think there are ways, maybe this is where I think you were going, Denise, so you can write it such that there are requirements for a certain level of medical knowledge, right, or a certain level of field expertise that doesn't necessarily get down to this level of specifics, which I think is where you were going. So as we get to the point of writing things, we can maybe keep that in mind, that it doesn't necessarily need to be a doctor or a nurse, but needs to be somebody who understands the field, and you can put language around that
Yeah.
level of expertise.
Yeah, and like Nancy said too, to consider whether you want to put it in the charter or the bylaw.
Yeah.
Bylaw is easier to change. Do you want it to be easier to change? I don't know, but just something to think about, yeah. I like, in section 6, I just like exclamation, this is a unique, we don't have anything like this, right?
No,
Youth
I've
and
never
Family
even
Services.
seen anything like this.
Up to 17 members. Great.
Yeah,
I wonder why they put I'm sorry to go back a little bit, I wonder why they put a term limit on Council of Aging.
yeah.
It doesn't make,
They put it in a few places, but not in all of them.
I
so,
said,
yeah.
why this position?
Yeah,
Why that
very-
one specifically of all?
Right.
That one I'd tend to let, you're doing God's work, keep going.
Right.
I thought the same thing. I mean, there's got to be something in the town, something political, something
yeah.
that we're
Something
not,
happened in
something,
the
Yeah.
correct, that
Right.
we're not privy to here in this, but there has to be a reason.
Yeah.
Some experience,
Right, and I
that
agree,
has had.
this probably is, somebody
Correct.
got in that role and
Yeah.
ran it like a kingdom. This is
Right.
freedom, and they didn't like it anymore.
right,
If you put it in the charter, now you're locked in for
yeah.
Yeah.
forever and ever. Close to
It must have been
forever.
that,
Yeah.
that big of a deal.
Yeah,
It just seemed like an odd
Right.
odd spot.
And then you mentioned the Youth and Family Services.
I just like, just unique, right?
Well, I had that too, and that was my thought too, and I feel like in 2019 with, you know, as we're getting, you know, even, not to overlap with the school committee, but the social emotional piece and the things with the youth and these things that are happening, my guess is this is new for them that they put in, and that's the number, because it surprised me, it said no fewer than 3, but no more than 17, like, that's a wide, that's a wide range.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking this is new, and they're kind of giving themselves some room to grow
And
within,
the
with the
wording is
charter.
very general. It says it's established to support the development of youth in the town. That
Yeah.
could be a large bucket of things, so what are they actually using it for? I don't know.
Is it supporting in conjunction with Parks and Rec?
I don't know.
It sounded, to me, I read it, I mean, maybe I read it as an educator, but to me, it just sounded like, you know, it's 2019, these are issues that are happening with our youth, and now as a town, we also have to pick up something and address that, and this Youth and Family Services, that's how I read it, is kind of their way
Yeah.
to start that process.
You could imagine that encompassing a lot of things, right? Like Keith was talking earlier about, wish we had better parks for the kids
Yeah.
to spend time in, like, right? Like thinking
Right.
about the bucket of what would be good for the youth of our town.
Yeah.
Could go very broadly.
Yeah.
yeah, because they've been thinking about a youth center,
Right.
and
Right.
then a board to run the youth
Yeah.
center, you know.
That'd be a good idea. How about
Could be like our youth sports,
Probably-
which are all
probably, yeah.
independently run, right? Most of our youth sports, I don't think they're not,
At the high school?
no, like all of our town sports.
Yeah, they're all have their own little boards and committees.
But they're not, they don't fall under the town, so they're all independently run in their own boards.
Right.
So it could be some of that stuff too in there, I don't know.
I think they left it broad enough that it can encompass almost, you know, any of these points that we're talking about.
Yeah,
But I read that and I thought, you know, I had a thought about that too as well. It stood
Yeah.
out to me
one of
yeah.
the-
as valuable.
Sorry.
It's similar to how Council on Aging had the limitation, which I thought was weird.
Yeah.
Town administrator says for an indefinite term, which I thought equally weird.
And it's one of the few that there's no compensation mentioned one way or the other.
What about they have comp?
Yeah,
Oh, which one is?
the Youth and Family Services, there's no
Yeah.
mention of it. Which they were so specific on every other one.
Yeah. Probably like Jenny said, it's probably new. They probably don't-
Could be.
And for what it's worth, our charter also says indefinite term for the town manager.
Oh, it does?
I think it's just, you're hiring somebody.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a contract gig, you're.
Yeah, he's an employee. Or
Yeah.
she's an employee.
Yeah.
Employee at will. Okay.
And under the town administrator, the things I noted was, one, they actually have a finance director who's appointed by the town administrator, which I took to be a stronger position than the town accountant.
Well, it
Yeah.
actually says it can be the accountant.
Yeah, but I think the role has a lot more responsibility than that's how I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I stopped, where do you see that? Can you tell me? I heard it.
6-2-1.
All right, yeah, please.
So here's a question I had. Reading 621, am I understanding this correctly, that the town administrator can fire Board of Selectmen appointments? It actually makes reference to.
Yeah, there's a reference to keeping the chairman of the board.
Keeping that person
in the loop.
informed.
Yeah. There's quite a few, there's a few references like that. He can do it, but he needs to keep the selectmen in the loop.
In general, it feels like the person that does the appointing, or the group that does the appointing, would be the one doing any discipline or removal,
Right.
so. But it is unclear.
Yeah.
As written in this
It
document.
looks like
Because
whatever they do, they have to went down to the Board of Selectmen.
yeah.
Same thing, yeah, that's what they do.
But it talks about having direct responsibility for all departments and employees appointed by the town administrator or the Board of Selectmen and the respective departments, and then goes on to say that this is what the powers and duties are. And it does refer to removing town officers. So I don't know if it was intended to be that way, or if there's just some ambiguity. I think being accountable to two different areas would be somewhat challenging, where you could be fired by either one.
Right.
This is where I kind of, some of these sections is where I saw where the selectmen became the limitations on what the town administrator could do.
Yeah.
That approval by the Board of Selectmen is what the selectmen became more
Powerful.
stronger.
Yeah.
And Section I, any contract over $100,000 shall require the approval of the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah. I noted that too.
We don't have that type of language that I could find. Subject to the approval of the board on
Comp.
L, yes, subject to the approval of board of directors, fix the compensation. And then an N, moving money between, transferring money within the budget if there was a limit on it or something like that.
And those kinds of things aren't unreasonable, right? My job, I can sign a contract up to X dollars, and
Yeah.
my boss
Right.
can sign like 10X, right? So-
Yeah, it's just different than we have here in Millwood,
Yeah.
because there's no language like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. The town manager approves the payroll warrants, which is different from how we currently do it. In the absence of a town administrator, the Board of Selectmen does it. That is one of the things that Lauren kept using as an example of things. She was looking for,
Differences?
yeah, she kept saying who approves the warrant, the payroll warrants.
Yeah, to me, I don't know what kind of information the Board of Selectmen are given, if it's just, like, all I see is the line item that says approving $604,000. Do they even know what they're approving, right, is the question. So it should be someone who understands what it is that's actually being approved.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. The town administrator also serves as the emergency management director.
I saw that.
That was interesting, yeah. Going on to the qualifications, and I had actually, Brad, before he came, before everybody had come in, he had said he's been on every steering committee to hire a town manager, and he actually helped draft the charter language for that section. And I found it, I said, interestingly enough, we were just reading a charter for another town where there's actually no specific formal process like ours to find a replacement. There's no guidance for the Board of Selectmen. They're kind of, go find one. We need a new town manager.
Again, that was that in their bylaws, do you think?
I don't know.
Or would that be stated someplace else besides the charter?
Yeah. It's hard, I mean, it's a lot of material to have to review the bylaws too, right? But it's hard to really get a full picture when you're only reading
Right.
a small piece of it.
Yeah. The other thing I found interesting in this section is contrary to ours. There is no time frame requirement for hiring a replacement town administrator, and there's no time limit on the amount of time a temporary town administrator can serve. Which may be something we want to look at. I'm thinking in this day and age, it might be a little bit more challenging, especially with a voluntary board as a steering committee, trying to find a qualified person within the time frame, which I think ours is, it allows 90 days and then a 90-day extension, and that's it. It's completely silent as to what happens if there's nobody found within 180 days.
Does it mention somewhere they can send them back for a second round after X amount of time? In ours? Does it mention
Yeah,
if they
I saw
don't
that
find a
in the chart.
qualified candidate within X amount of times, they can
Go
send
back
them
out again, you mean?
Yes.
If the
For-
selectmen don't like the candidate that's
Correct.
proposed, they have
Here's
to go
your
back.
second round, yeah.
Yep.
I don't know what the time, I don't know what the time frame is for that, but it does point that out.
Yeah, it looked to be 180 days on both the temporary being able to fill that position and for the time frame for the Board of Selectmen to find a new. I just don't know whether, yeah, I can see both sides of it, you know. Putting a deadline on it will obviously make things happen faster, but what happens if they don't? Just food for thought. The moderator certainly has a little bit more power here.
I liked how for the Finance and Warrant Commission guidance in 732, it states that the moderator shall take into consideration the demographic composition of the town. So even with that power, there's some, again, I think that's more guidance, right? It doesn't say it's got to be 6 of this type or whatever. It says it has to be reflective of the town, right?
Yep.
And going back to, in this particular charter, the moderator is only a one-year position. So, maybe has some more power here, but limited, definitely has a check and balance that.
Yeah. Theory, maybe.
Correct. You might get half that done in a year, but it does have that, it does point that out. So that's limiting.
Yeah. Theoretically, our moderator could turn over the entire finance committee in one term, right? In this, you can turn over 1/5.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, the additional ones that they do, right, are the personnel boards and the permanent building commission, they appoint all those too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Personnel board was an interesting position.
Yeah, town classification and compensation plan.
Voluntary. I'm not sure how you'd find somebody who'd be interested in that position.
Yeah, it almost,
Who would that appeal to?
it feels like it would appeal to finance committee people.
Yeah.
That almost feels dangerous that, we've heard at town meeting over the past years, people complaining about certain department heads or whomever being paid too much, right? I can see somebody like that wanting to be on this committee just to go in and
Yeah.
slash salaries.
Yeah, I'd almost think if you wanted that kind of a role, it would make more sense to have it as part of FinCom's responsibility, because they're the ones that know what the budget is, right? What the constraints are.
Supposed to know.
Huh?
They're supposed to know.
Yeah.
I liked how, I found it interesting that so many other departments or commissions were not very well fleshed out, but the Permanent Building Commission definitely is. Even to go so far as to say the moderator will endeavor to include residents that have architecture, engineering, construction experience, knowledge of state public bidding laws. And then they're referring to them as temporary members, but they're basically assigning a representative of an elected or an appointed board from the committee that benefits from a particular project. That's
Yeah.
not necessarily a bad idea.
And in that criteria, the experience looking for it says endeavor to include, so it gives you the flexibility. If you don't have
Yeah,
people that fit the criteria, you can be a little bit more flexible, right?
right.
Which-
But I mean, ours has literally like a listing, the Board of Selectmen shall appoint, is it the Board of Selectmen or the Town Administrator shall appoint a permanent building committee, and nowhere else in there is it mentioned at all as to what they do or how they're made up.
Excuse me.
Okay. I also found it interesting that anything with an estimated cost of more than $100,000, and I'm thinking in this day and age, wouldn't that be every project?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
There's a lot in here where I would just love to talk to the person who wrote it and say, why this, and why this, and why this? Not
What
because
was
it's bad
happening?
necessarily, but like, why is there 2.5 pages on the
Finance department, yeah.
Right, that just, same thing, like, what happened?
What happened? Someone tell us.
Because when I read it, I guess my general assumption, I guess, was that this finance department worked very closely with the town manager. And like the budget was kind of like was between the two.
Yeah.
The finance director and the town manager equally were building
Yeah.
the budget.
Do we not?
Whereas in one, I think, I mean, I'm sure the town accountant plays a role, but he's not, at the end of the day, it's the town manager who presents it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in Westwood, when I read it, was that when it comes time to present it, the finance director and the town manager present to the selectmen, who then ultimately, and then they ultimately submit it to the town.
Yeah, it wasn't the finance.
Right, so it wasn't
Right.
solely the town manager.
Right.
And I wonder if there's so much focus on the finance department, because as I was reading about the town in general, I saw something that said they were, per capita income is the 9th highest in Massachusetts, so.
Yeah.
It might just be, they might just have some more finances to deal with, right? So they need, I don't know.
Westwood's an interesting town. During the housing crisis back in 2007, 2008, it was the only town in the entire state that didn't suffer a loss in valuation in housing.
Really?
Yeah, because it's such a ideal proximity to Boston, and they've got public transportation and the 128 corridor.
Yeah.
It's like the place everybody wants to live.
Very nice town.
All right. There shall be a fire department. Well,
Yeah.
that's good.
So the Department of Public Works, what does that imply? Does that mean, is that highway and,
Highway and water.
highway and water?
Yeah, I meant to go to the chapter
That's
one,
Public Works, yeah.
140 to see what they included under that.
Yeah. It's highway and water, but not sewer, right? Because I thought I saw sewer earlier as being an elected board.
Some towns, they're all together.
Yeah, there's a board of sewer, yeah, 431 was a board of sewer commissioners. I think it's elected for 3-year terms.
I think in line with the finance department, the audit committee is interesting.
I'm a little surprised there's no requirements of financial aptitude or experience on that.
The
On the
audit
audit
committee,
committee?
yeah.
Yeah, you'd think that you'd want people who are auditing it.
Right.
Yeah.
We have someone come into town to us every year, so,
Yeah, we have an outside
yeah.
company.
Yeah,
Well, I think they do, I think they have it done too. The audit committee,
they just have them,
they work with the outside auditors and
Right.
ultimately oversee.
Yeah, because they're talking about revealing
our
the,
accountant, he gets all the paperwork for them. So,
Yeah.
I did like under the financial procedures 945, that they specifically identify that they conduct one or more public meetings on the proposed operating budget at least 14 days prior to its submission at the annual town meeting. Because I don't think we have a formalized public meeting to have
technically
those
do.
discussions.
I think maybe do.
Yeah,
We do?
yeah, one of their meetings is called the public hearing.
Yeah.
Right.
And nobody ever shows up, and then everybody yells at every town meeting.
But no.
But is it a town-run meeting, or is it?
it's a FinCom run meeting.
FinCom run.
it's a FinCom, we got capital, it's all, it's open to the public.
Gotcha.
But I don't know how well, I mean, it goes back to how well advertised it is and how much advance notice.
It's
people
communicated,
get,
that's the purpose of it, right?
Yeah, I find their agendas sort of ambiguous too, as to actually what's going to be covered on any given night.
I mean, they do put that specifically on the agenda, the
Oh, do they do?
public hearing, yeah,
Okay.
but I don't know, I feel like I never know until it's,
I think I've seen public hearing, but I didn't really know what that meant, right? Does that mean that you want to hear my thoughts on the budget, but I don't really have the information to come?
there's another part of
Right?
it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And until you get there, and then even when you get there, you may not even be given a handout as to what's being discussed.
Yeah, it's hard to come up with good questions if you don't know what the materials are.
I thought that 9-4-2, kind of general comment, summary budget message, you know, and they mentioned this a few times, that the budget should have a message. And that ultimately, and the selectmen ultimately can change that message. So they seem like they focus a little bit like on, what are we trying to get at? What's the goal of this budget?
Yeah.
You know, what are our top priorities? And
Yeah, like we tend to just have a big spreadsheet that compares
Right.
year over year, but doesn't give you a lot of.
And it's only on paper.
It's only on paper, right? This one here says, like, it gives you a little more information, like, what are the major changes from in the current year? Like, explain what those are, and
right.
I think there was one, and it might have been either Dayton or Rehoboth, when they were going through their budget issues last year, that they had a lot of that information kind of really clearly spelled out, like, in their budget presentation about what they were asking for, why they're asking for it, what it meant, like, the real questions that people would need to know versus just a bunch of numbers.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, to me, like, a lot of times a budget is really, it's more of it's really a political document in some ways, right? Because, you know, you have a pool of money and you can spend it in some way. There's only so much money to go around, you have to allocate money.
Yeah.
But, you know, politically, you're saying, okay, I'm gonna give more to the schools, or I'm gonna give less to the schools. You know, that's a political decision, you know, and no one doesn't really do a good job, in my opinion, of doing that. Because they're not forced to, it's just a bunch of spreadsheets.
Yeah,
And money's moving around, but only the best and brightest are gonna figure out without spending a lot of time figuring it out.
yeah, and if you spend a lot of time asking questions in advance, you can find out a lot of information, but if you're just relying on what you get at town meeting and you see like line item 940 is whatever, you don't really know what that means.
Well, that's how I read it too. The summary budget is nice for the voter because you're not looking at that chart and trying to piece all that together and looking at all those numbers. The summary budget gives them, you know, this is what's changed, this is
Right.
how it's changed, this is how much it's changed, and kind of in a nice, easy format for people like me
Absolutely.
Show me
yeah.
the picture.
to really comprehend.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, it's only as good as the
I
person
like
who
that.
writes it, of course, you know.
Yeah.
But the,
That's true.
I almost feel like any budget line item that's either increased or decreased by some percentage amount, there should be an explanation explaining why they did that.
I know, like when I did my budget, it's all written down. Everything's individual, tells me where every penny's going. But when you go to the town meeting, it's only the numbers.
Right.
But anybody can come here and look at
Oh, sure,
the
but
budget.
that's,
But if everybody brought in a town meeting with all their budgets and forget it, we'd be there all night trying to figure out.
well, no, I'm not even going to summary my department, I'm just saying like, an overall. I think what they're driving at is like an overall summary.
But I do think that nitty-gritty would be nice to have publicly available. So if I
Yeah.
wanted to do the research, if I wanted to dig more, understand what the numbers were, I could see the information if I chose to.
And I think that's part of what Brad was trying to get at too, when he's saying people come to these meetings and they don't have that. They didn't have the information ahead of time, 2 weeks ahead of time, that you have
Right.
prepared anyway, but they don't know where to get it
Yeah,
or how to access it.
If we had an IT guy, we could probably have it on.
yeah,
Or me! My wealth of knowledge.
yeah.
I think Sandy had shown me, I think it was, right, Mansfield, I think, the school budget.
They do a good job.
I mean, you can read that one-page document and really understand how that budget works.
Yeah.
And what they're focusing on. It's-
And I think it's nice to have those summary, but I think it's nice to have all the nitty-gritty if someone wants to dig further. If they choose to,
Yeah.
if they love that minutia, let them dig in it and look at it.
And again, it's only good as the guy who wrote it.
Bless you.
But I just like the
Yeah.
fact that they put it in there. I mean, to me, they have a real focus on trying to be, I think, a little more transparent, I guess, and
Yeah,
with
I
the
like it.
driving behind a lot of
Yeah, I think Mary kind of mentioned too about presenting the budget in a clearer way or something like that, something along those lines too, when she was talking earlier.
Because ultimately, it's the selectmen who got us, in Westwood, they got to submit it, so they're not finance people.
Right.
So they need to understand it and present it.
Right.
It kind of forces you to get more in the layman's terms. Well, how do I present this thing?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, 9-4-6 specifically says the Board of Selectmen shall be responsible.
Anything else anybody wanted to raise?
All I have.
The next one we're gonna review is Weston. We need to find out if this is actually the document, though. Who was gonna do some further research?
I said I'll look.
Okay.
See if there's anything else and I can send it out.
Okay.
Find something.
Thank you. Given our schedule, we may actually not have time to look it over,
Yeah.
or just at least discuss it that night, so we'll buy ourselves a little bit more time.
So that one we got tonight, we're not sure if that's the actual.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna hold off on that.
Hold off, yeah.
Okay.
You know, if you
It's
are
almost like they took,
bored and want to read it,
you know, I'm guessing like this chapter 80 and chapter 261, I'm guessing those are state statutes. And they're just tweaking those statutes to fit the town of Weston.
yeah. The fact that it's a red line document and not in a final form is also confusing.
You know, could you just check with Lauren and see if she meant to give us this, or if she meant to give us something else?
Did she just send you a link?
She
No,
did,
she
she
sent
actually
us
sent it as an
this
attachment.
The actual, this
This was the
actual.
Yeah.
attachment.
Oh,
She
gotcha.
said, see attached.
I'm just concerned,
Maybe she attached the wrong thing.
yeah, but
Boy,
I'm,
that's what I'm wondering, if it'd
Yeah.
be easiest to check with her and see.
and that might have to be a phone call, because at this point, I've sent her a few emails and haven't heard back from her yet, so, I'm just afraid in terms of timing, when we're likely to hear, so maybe it's a phone call. I will make a phone call.
Okay.
Of course, I did my homework.
Okay, what time have we got? How's everybody doing? Do we want to press on?
I'm going to be real quick.
Okay.
So for the survey options, based on the minutes from last meeting and an email that Laura sent me, I went and looked at options that we could use to collect feedback, ideally anonymously and ideally for free, were the two things that I was really focused on. The two big players in the field are SurveyMonkey and Google Forms. SurveyMonkey has a free option, but then it's a paid service. So the free option has a lot of limitations on it, limits the number of questions you can ask on a survey, the number of people that can respond to the survey, the things you can do with it, the types of questions you can ask, all these things. Google Forms is not as malleable as the paid-for SurveyMonkey, but doesn't have any of those other limitations. You can have as many people you want come in. You can ask whatever questions you want. You can have check boxes, bullet lists, open-ended questions, short answer questions, whatever you want. It's easy enough that my kids make Google Forms and send us surveys about everything from Greek mythology to different styles of dance. So we can probably figure it out as well if they can do it, or I can just delegate down to
the
them.
kids.
Yeah, I can have them. I'm sure they'd love to be involved. but that would be my recommendation. If there was another request that I saw in the meeting minutes to have people respond anonymously, but make sure that they don't send in like a million responses, that you can't do, right? The only way that Google, there's really two ways, I guess, to restrict it. One, with Google, you can say you have to sign in order to be able to receive this. My understanding, though I didn't actually go and test it, is we wouldn't get to see still who did it. They just validate that somebody has signed in, and then you can say only let one person respond once. The trick there is they have to sign into a Google account. It can't just be into any email. So we would be restricting it only to people who have Google accounts. The other way, which I don't think would work for us, but I saw some people do to kind of get around this issue, is if you're sending the survey out to specific people, say, okay, your response code is 143 or whatever, and then which response codes you sent out, and so you only look at the responses that came back with that correct code, and if you see the same code 1,000 times, you just ignore all those because it's the same person 1,000 times. But I don't think that's really for sending it out. Like, if we wanted to send a survey to all of us, right, we could give each of us a code, and that would help. But that I don't think is going to work if we just want to have it available and say, hey, people of Norton, if you want to give us any feedback, here's a way to do it. So my recommendation would be to use the Google Forms, but also read the results with skepticism's not the right word, but understand that people on the internet say a lot of things that they wouldn't say in person, right? And I know that's part of the reason that we want to do it on the good side of that so that people can be comfortable, but people on the internet say a lot of things that they wouldn't say in person. So we just got to keep that in mind as we're going through the results.
Yeah, I think we can make the name portion optional. Some people may actually fill in their name. We don't necessarily have to make it fully anonymous.
Yep.
We can make it optional. Although I am still waiting to hear back from Lauren on that topic. But given some of the research that I've been doing with the other town charter commissions, the two that I've seen, specifically Amherst and I forget what the other town was, it asks, for their name, but it's purely optional.
Write in Mighty Mouse if you want.
Yep.
Yes.
I think risk versus reward means it's probably worth it. The risk of someone loading you 10 times with the same response.
Yeah.
The reward is you're going to get a lot of.
It's an option to collect information, and we
Yeah.
should
Right.
just read it with a discerning eye when it comes in.
Yep, I agree.
How are we going to send that out? How are we going to get the email?
I think one of the better options is using Norton Alerts and making them aware of, ideally, how I was thinking it would work is we can send out the alert similar we did for the public hearing, but send them to a specific, either our website and a link within our website or our webpage on the town's website, or a specific URL that holds the survey, and Dave can weigh in more on that.
Yeah, and you can, once you have it set up, you can blast that address everywhere. Right? If
Yeah.
we have a Facebook page, it should go on the Facebook page. It should go on our website. We should shout it from the hilltops,
Yeah.
right?
But I think if we make.
Go out and see the
Yeah,
survey, yeah.
yeah, we can actually so the Norton Alerts currently hits about 5,000 people. And I think if we provide a link within it, people will be, look at the,
You talking about the email option only? It hits 5,000 people, or
no,
overall? Or are you gonna go through the phone?
no, I'd probably do, I don't know, how many are on the phone list, do you
I
know?
thought the phone was a lot more because
Was it?
Because people are automatically registered.
Okay. Yeah, we could certainly do both. I think people are more inclined if they get an email and there's a link, they just click it and make it easier, whereas if we call them, they've got to actually go and grab a pen and what's that website and write it all down to get to it. But I don't see a point.
The tricky part of Norton Alerts is you opt what to sign up for, right? So,
But you can send it to all, and it's not, so there, I don't understand what the opt-in options are for at the end of the day. We are now there. I made sure we're there so people can specifically choose to receive information about the Charter Commission, But I can send out an alert to anybody who has signed up for a general alert.
Right, but I mean, you sign up for if you want an email, or if you want a text, or if
Yes.
you want, right, so only, only some people sign up for the email.
Yeah,
They
there's
don't-
5,000 on email.
Right.
I don't know how many are on the
Some people
phone.
just sign up for a text, or some people just sign up for
Yeah.
a phone, so it's tough to reach everybody just through one.
It is, but I'm optimistic that we can reach more people than, let's say, Attleboro did, where they had not even 100 people fill in their survey. I'm hoping with the alerts and sending a URL within that alert, it makes it easy enough that, oh yeah, sure, I'll do that. I mean, I'm looking at, I forget what there was on Facebook, a couple of people, just even on Norton Neighbors, had put together like
What's the Peter channel?
a quick survey of people, I forget what it was, kids looking, some kids project, please fill out my kids' survey for their school project, and, they were looking for, we need like 25 responses, and they got like 300. So I think if you make it easy enough for people, and
Yeah, and I feel like Dave said, once you have that URL, you can post it on like neighbors and all,
Yeah.
all those pages, and even, I would even give it to, I forget what her name is, that runs the senior center. I'm sure they have computers that the seniors can go in and
Yeah.
use, right? So they can use it when they go in
Yeah.
there, like, here's the link for the.
well, even the Norton Media Center, we can have them do just a quick page saying,
Yeah.
hey, there's a survey up, please go here.
Yeah.
We can hit kind of all the same things that we did for, with the exception of the Sun Chronicle.
If someone doesn't have a computer, are there computers at the library they can go use? I don't really know.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And it'll automatically format it in a way that looks normal on your phone too, if you go to it from your phone versus a computer versus whatever.
Good.
Yeah, I like the idea of the senior center and just engaging as many other departments as possible, telling them, can you
Yeah.
promote
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Because not everyone's looking at all the pages in the, yeah.
So, Adam,
So
just
am
to
I
clarify on the alerts, no alerts would come via email, only if you sign up for email?
Well, that's what, I mean, Laura has a choice of how she wants to send it.
You can't do both.
I can. Yep. I do any of them. I can actually even have Chris.
Get a phone call, an email, and a
Yeah.
text.
And Chris.
Is it Laura's voice on the?
Yeah. Well, I guess I was only thinking, I think myself, I only signed up for text.
Yeah. Chris Zahner can also send a Facebook post out on there's a Norton Alerts Facebook page that some people have signed up for, and they have a Twitter page. So you can hit them there as well. Twitter and Facebook are more limited because it's only the people that have chosen to either follow or like that particular page or get notifications from it. I'm optimistic that we could get a decent response.
Yeah, I'm more sensitive to, you don't want to have at the end someone say, I never knew anything about this.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's why I'm saying, like the senior center
I
will
will hurt
specifically
people.
post in their thing,
That's what I'm more saying, it's the ones who just,
Yeah,
because they won't be a Norton. You think that well, most of them probably are Norton neighbors looking.
yeah.
yeah, but we try as hard as we can. And
Just resign yourself to the fact that somebody's going to go, I had
No,
no
I
idea
know.
you were doing this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no,
Yeah.
you tried really hard. and,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
There's only so much I can say.
We have the opinion, I think Google Forms sounds like the better option, especially because we don't want to be restricted to the number of people who can actually fill out the survey.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Dave's kids will set that up for us.
Sure.
Excellent. All right, since we've actually covered half the question, do we want to, I did put a list of questions together based on a few things, some of them from North Attleboro. I pulled up Amherst's, and then just a couple of other random ideas. Most of the towns seem like, at least in the initial survey, didn't ask more than 5 or 6 questions, which seemed reasonable. And one of them, in the case of Amherst, was, do you have any other thoughts or feedback you'd like to give us? So I don't know, do we want to take the time now? Is everybody okay to power through and?
I was wondering if we can just, as opposed to having you listening to you read them off, if we can, maybe I'll send our suggestions to you and then
Okay.
print them out for the next
Okay.
meeting and really.
And maybe share those with us. so we
Yeah,
can
I've got a
noodle 'em?
list.
Right. Start, that's our starting point.
Yeah.
And then kind of think about what Carrie had said last week about, or last meeting, about keeping it some open-ended, some, can we change the format of some of them too, to make it a nice balance of types of questions that
Okay.
we have.
All right, I'll send out what I've got gathered so far. I'll leave out, well, I'll put in there a list of like ideas to think about, things that might be a little bit outside the box, like specifically, do we want to ask the question outright, do you like open town meeting? Do we want to get that specific in the survey?
I think if we're gonna try to limit it to 5 or 6 questions, I don't know if I want to get that specific, because then it's hard to kind of get,
I think that kind of question, you're going to say, you want to get rid of it, or do you like it? And if you didn't, what would you want?
Yeah.
yeah,
A simple yes or no is not going to get us too far.
yeah. Right.
Okay. All right, so we'll table that, well, I'll send that around, and then we'll table the discussion of the format and the questions for the next meeting. Anybody else, anything else they would like to talk about or discuss?
I just want to mention, it just dawned on me.
Yeah.
July 22nd, I'm just going to mention, I would not be here. And I only mentioned because I'm
Nerve.
thinking that other people may have vacation. July.
I think heading in,
I throw it out here now.
Come on.
Yeah.
That I won't be there.
You wait until 10 past 10 to drop that on us?
heading into the summer, we're just gonna have to resign ourselves to the fact.
Well, that's why I'm bringing it up. Because
Yeah. I'm sorry, which date?
The 22nd, only because I'm bringing it up because if there's more than me,
Yeah.
we have a problem.
Okay.
Well, lucky for you, my vacation
I'm not rubbing you-
falls
I'm
in
not rubbing
between
you.
meetings.
We only need 5 to have a
Where are we
quorum.
going?
Cape.
Going in, please.
I'm going to the Cape.
Yeah.
David out 7/22. Anybody else know that they're out that week?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm good.
Yep. We only need 5 for quorum, so, I mean, ideally, it'd be nice to have more, but we can muddle through. Okay. Sorry, let's keep going. Our next meeting is July 8th. Right now, we've got at least 2 folks showing up to interview.
Is that here? Just,
It'll be here, yeah. Every meeting now is here, at least through the end of this year.
okay.
Action items, I'm gonna call Lauren about the Weston Charter, and I'm gonna send the survey to the Charter Commission for review. Were there any other action items, Sandy? From anybody else?
No.
Nobody else owes us anything? Okay. All right, anybody have any, I don't think we've got any room for topics on the agenda for next, so it'll be fairly bare bones. I'll put on there discussion of the format and questions of the survey, just in case we have some time and we feel like getting to it.